So I have a few requests of, I think, members of the committee and also the public. If you can keep statements and questions to the point, and if I can ask officers to keep any answers as well to the point, just so we can try to get through as much of our business as possible. So first off, introductions. I'm Tim Kent. I'm the Chair of People's Scrutiny Commission. Welcome. And Hugh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, morning everyone. I'm Hugh Evans. I'm Exec Director for People in Bristol City Council.
Thank you. Welcome. Safety information. If the fire alarm should go off, then we proceed out following the signs. Right. I'll follow you and hopefully we'll get somewhere safe. Apologies for absence and substitutions. Ian.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Councillor Bales has sent her apologies. Councillor Hornchon is substituting. Councillor Y has sent apologies. Councillor Hants is substituting. Apologies also for Councillor Massey. Councillor Ali is due to substitute, but I don't think she's arrived yet. Also apologies from Councillor Helen Holland, Cabinet Member, who's on holiday for this meeting. And from Ossam, Councillor Bradshaw and Councillor Gollop have sent apologies. Councillor Scott as well. Yep. And Councillor Scott, yeah.
Thank you. And just to explain, because of the death of Her Majesty, we did have to we had to postpone the previous meeting, so this date was not in people's diaries. So it has clashed with a lot of other activities that councillors already had, as well as work. So hence why there's such a churn of people. I'd also like to welcome members of Overview and Scrutiny Management Board and the Chair, Tony Dyer, as well as other members. Thank you for coming along, who are here for our item of business under the fact-finding report, the social media monitoring. Declarations of interest. I'll start. I want to make two declarations. One member of the public gallery I'm married to, so just to declare that. And secondly, I attended the meeting of the Bristol Parent Carer Forum, which elected the current officers and voted in that. I don't see that in any way as ruling me out from being part of today's meeting. Were there any other declarations of interest? Great, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Hopefully people have had a chance to read through those. It was from a while ago. Were there any amendments, or can we approve those as being correct? Yeah, I think everyone's fine. We'll approve those as being correct. Chair's business. So just a couple of things. One thing, I want to apologise to certain members of the public who've not had a written reply to your answers. I do believe that you should have had a written reply, and I understand there is pressure on officers at the moment regarding the re-inspection, but it's not acceptable not to get answers to you in time for the meeting. So I will bring this up with the director at the end of the meeting. But for now, I just want to put in place my apology to you for that. And I will try to ensure that you get answers as soon as possible. Hopefully, we can get them far quicker than said in the paperwork. Secondly, actually, can I call now on Hugh just to give us an update on staffing, because there has been a lot of changes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Kent. So very briefly, just to inform you that we have recently been successful in a recruitment for a executive director for children's and education. Abby Gabago is going to be joining us in December. We're very pleased with Abby's appointment. She's coming from Barking and Dagenham Council in London. As you'll know as well, Alison Hurley recently stepped down as the Director of Education for Bristol City Council. And so on an interim basis, very pleased to welcome Richard Hanks, who's here today, who is going to be the Director of Education on an interim basis for a period of time until the new exec director comes, and then we'll be thinking about structures and how to organise things and potentially going for a permanent recruitment at that stage.
Thank you very much. Next item of business is public forum. So we have quite a bit of public forum in today. And we want to try to give everybody a chance to get through that. As long as the Commission are happy, I'm going to extend time for public forum by up to 10 minutes, so to 40 minutes, to try to give us that chance to get through everything. We have quite a few statements and a lot of questions in. So for statements, I'm going to ask if people can limit themselves to 2 minutes, that would be appreciated. There's 1 or 2 members of the public who are subject of a report, and I've said they can have a little bit longer. But if you could limit yourself to 2 minutes, that would give us a chance then to move on to questions. For questions, if you have supplementary questions, or you don't need to re-ask your main question, you should have seen, hopefully, the written answers to your questions. What you can then do is ask a supplementary question, and if you can limit yourself up to a maximum of 2 supplementaries, you get technically 1 supplementary per question, but some people have more than 2 questions in. Again, that will just let us get through, hopefully, most of the questions that are here today. So first off, we'll move on to statements, and first off, I have Mr. S. Smith. Is he present? No. Okay, next, can I call Jen Smith to speak to her statement?
Hi, thank you, Chair. Just before I start, I'd just like to reiterate that I'm here as a parent. I'm not representing any organisation, and I'm also the subject of the spying report. I think I was Twitter user 2. So the fact-finding report on this morning's agenda, looking into social media spying by Bristol City Council, is a whitewash. The unlawful covert spying is also a continually evolving situation with one thing clear. We are nowhere near understanding the full extent of the data the Council has amassed, profiled and shared. Council staff are using their own resources as well as staff's private social media accounts to collect this information. It's taken 3 months to get the results of an FOI regarding the situation. The result, a bizarre collection of documents showing extensive spying. I've submitted some of these in the public forum document. The FOI did not contain any requested communications, and I refuse to believe council staff communicate telepathically, so these are obviously being withheld. My own SAR is now well overdue, but the council will not respond to my emails asking where it is or how long it will take. I feel suspicious. From the lack of ownership of this mess, it's clear the rotten culture has been sanctioned at the very top of Bristol City Council, a politicised council with a mayoral administration that clearly hates SEND parents. Nothing negative must be uttered about Bristol, no matter how factual, including feedback which this report shows must not be negative at all. I believe this is bigger than the Parent Carer Forum. Twitter users are being unfairly targeted and profiled in their attempts to speak out against injustice and imbalances of power in this city. Everyone should be worried. I've experienced it because I had the temerity to talk online, in the media, and at the public forum of council meetings like this one about the shambolic experiences my children have had at the hands of Bristol's SEND system. They don't like it, but even now we're still waiting over 5 months for our EHCP social care provision, so it's not great, is it? Make no mistake, this monitoring was going on before I came and left as Vice Chair of BPC. Whilst part of the Parent Carer Forum, I did not engage in any campaign activity under its name, and no complaint was ever lodged by the Council regarding any meeting I attended in my capacity as Forum representative. I didn't do anything wrong other than simply exist. I certainly did not leak confidential information from a co-production meeting that never existed, as claimed in paragraph 34 by both the Council and Sendias. Why have they made these defamatory statements in an official report? Despite the Dolores Umbridge management at the Council, I do not tell lies. I've been told to my face by top council managers that I am responsible for all the SEND caseworkers leaving, that my neurodivergent tweets on Twitter, ones not for the council, are aggressive, and that top managers have issues with me making statements in public forum like this one, and that is a direct attack on democracy. The council seems to think that information in the public domain is theirs to do with as they like, but it's not that simple. Not when it amounts to repeated covert surveillance, collating and sharing data, doxing accounts, profiling people, being against freedom of speech, being prejudiced against them due to their disability, which is a protected characteristic, as well as discriminating against them for taking protected acts. Why aren't council officers following the Nolan principles, FOI, GDPR, RIPA, the Equality Act 2010 and the Human Rights Act, and what are they hiding? Bristol is spies, lies and no production. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. And I should have told everybody as well, we are actually recording and live broadcasting this meeting. So just to warn everybody, that is the case. Sorry, I should have announced that at the beginning. Anyway, thank you very much, Jen. Next, I have Hayley Hemming. I believe you have 2 statements, Hayley. So perhaps if you want to speak to both at the same time. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Hayley Hemming, the Chair of the Bristol Parent Carer Forum. The Forum is a volunteer-led charity whose steering group and members are parent carers of children with SEND. All of our team have first-hand experience of navigating SEND services alongside caring for some of the most vulnerable children and young people in Bristol. I had intended to come here today to read the statement that we had already provided, but last week I experienced a distressing meeting in which a local councillor labelled me vexatious and implied that a certain level of hysteria has accompanied these monitoring allegations. This made us feel that some members of Bristol staff are oblivious to the harm and upset that they have caused to the SEND community, to the forum officer's reputation, and to the forum itself. The same local councillor told members of the meeting that she is on the side of the SEND team and that vital resources are being diverted from this team in dealing with meetings and investigations on this topic. I have not come here today to talk about the lawfulness of the behaviour of council staff or its consultants. I have come to make it clear that we agree with the councillor. As volunteers passionate about improving SEND systems, this is the very last thing that we want to spend our time doing. But 2 of the 5 areas of the weakness from the last Ofsted inspection highlighted concerns around accountability and the fractured relationship between parents and carers. Our concerns and that of the SEND community are closely related to these 2 issues which persist 3 years after the original inspection. To encourage a roomful of council staff to laugh at the notion that our social media has been surveilled when we have read a report that details it has been accessed at least 8 separate times is disrespectful. It speaks volumes about the way families, children and young people with SEND are treated in Bristol on a daily basis. When we look at the answers to some of the questions submitted to this scrutiny group, it appears that officers replying do not want to be held to account. It seems that they do not want to listen to or accept the questions that families have put to them. They do not want to reply with tangible answers to help citizens, parents and carers understand reasons for decisions that have been made. Instead, the answers provided by officers imply a new allegation that forum officers are openly criticising the strategy that we were seemingly involved in developing, which has eroded trust and confidence. In the statement that we did originally submit to scrutiny, we clearly detailed that forum officers have broken no rules. These rules are laid out by Bristol City Council's own funding terms, the DFE and Contact. We also have internal policies covering conflicts of interest which also have not been broken. SEND and you themselves have stated that the meeting our former Vice Chair attended was a public meeting. She attended in the capacity of a parent, not as a forum officer. No confidential information has been leaked via social media. Bristol would not agree to sign the agreement to enable the forum to access the DFE funding. In part, this was because they perceive that the forum is not inclusive enough. Yet, it also appears that the forum is on trial for being too inclusive in allowing families who have largely been critical in their personal lives about SEND services. As an organisation, we are not equipped to be continuously placed on trial in the public realm, whether this is by press releases, one-sided fact-finding reports, vexatious complaints about our volunteers, or verbal attacks on my professional reputation during council-led meetings. We need to put our differences aside and work together to accept that we have the same vision. We are committed to working with Bristol City Council as we do with our local health colleagues. Our statement submitted outlines several quick wins to some of the current challenges within the EHCP
Can you just summarise now, Hayley?
It's nearly the end, sorry, Chair. The only way that we can move forward and improve the fractured relationship is with true co-production and in equal partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next on my list is Sally Kent.
Bear with me. So my statement outlines the support that the current Parent Carer Forum leadership have within the SEND community, with over 90 supporting signatures, and it is available for people to read. However, what I'd like to talk about today, and in regard to our closed Facebook EHCP peer support group, is the RIP file of emails connected to our group and one of the people mentioned in the report of which the council holds. The existence of this file came to light through an FOI and is not mentioned within the official report. Just to clarify, for membership of our peer support group, 3 questions are asked. Are you a parent carer? Do you live in Bristol and surrounding local authorities? The answer to these questions must be yes. The third question is, lastly, do you work in health, education or social care? If they do, then they are not allowed membership of this closed private group. I'm concerned of what methods the council has used to collect the data contained within the zip file named EHCP Experiences Facebook group, and that the official report is not as thorough as it could and should have been. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, I have Hannah Summers and Amy Valencia. Oh, I think Councillor Edwards, you're doing that.
I am. Hello. I'm speaking on behalf of Hannah Summers today. So Hannah and Amy have been campaigning for the last year to highlight the problems faced in their specific part of our ward, looking for secondary places for their children, and they have submitted a petition with over 500 signatures, 561 signatures. So they say, having already submitted to both full council and people scrutiny at past meetings, we wish to hear what progress is being made in regards to our cause. We ask that our portion of Horfield, which is in Bishopston and Ashley Down ward, is confidently served by at least one secondary school. We recently had our story and campaign covered by BBC Points West. It has come to our attention that after thorough research, investigation and inspired by local experiences that many families are facing huge issues with securing local provision. This seems mostly driven by the fact that the majority of Bristol secondaries are now academies and that their own authority on admissions and catchments. It appears that there are flaws within how Bristol City Council oversees how these academies serve the whole city in a realistic and fair way. We believe that Redland Green School, Fairfield High School have not reviewed their catchments since 2006, let alone since the new Trinity Academy opened. Trinity's catchment overlaps with both Orchard Academy and Fairfield, yet our portion of this area is not served by any of them. Redland Green's popularity realistically means our area is now not served by this school at all, and this needs recognition and reflection of how its catchments are reviewed. Ooh. Part of this response from the ex-Director of Education, Alison Hurley, in response to our last submission stated, the local authority's role is to coordinate the admission arrangements and ensure sufficiency. Our area has no sufficiency or certainty that any child would secure a local place. In response to our comments submitted to the 2023-24 school admissions consultations, we were informed by Fairfield Excalibur Trust Academies that whilst Excalibur do have the authority to change the catchment area, we would not do this without discussion with Bristol City Council. Many of the points you raise... Sorry. Oh gosh, don't do that. Many of the points you raise require action and coordination at local authority level rather than admission authority level. We ask that discussions begin without hesitation, not after several years, as has been suggested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, I have Sandra Thomas. Is Sandra present? No. Okay. I have Councillor Jeff Gollop, which I think Mark Weston you're going to speak to.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, Jeff has another meeting with the moving around of the diaries. He really just wanted me to stress his latter paragraphs. We have an example here when it comes to the report of what we regard as the council targeting some of the most vulnerable people in our community, in our society. And you are right, and the council is right, this is a distraction, but it's a self-inflicted distraction. And the reason it's so abhorrent to many of us is it shows a complete lack of moral compass. There should be no point where it's acceptable for the council to even be in the position where it is perceived to be spying on residents. And that's exactly where this falls. And the problem we've got on this is, if it's send now, well, what if it's a contentious transport issue? Are campaign groups going to get the same? What if it's a contentious parks issue? Will they get the same? Is it a community group where there's a bit of a fracas? This opens up a whole can of worms, which is, its vulgarity itself is what's exercising us so much. This should never have been allowed to happen. And Councillor Gollett wanted me to stress that today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Weston. And finally, I have Rowena Hayward and Jeff Sutton. I think Jeff's present.
Thank you, Chair. It's Jeff Sutton, Branch Secretary of the GMB. This is in relation to the Adult Social Care Transformation Update. The GMB welcomes comments made in the report regarding South Bristol Rehab Centre, where it states that important lessons were learnt in relation to working with health partners and the impact on staff during the process, and these will be applied in future work. However, to date, management have made no attempt to contact the GMB regarding our request for a lessons learnt opportunity. So the GMB have also requested the HR committee to set up an investigation into the way in which this process has been conducted and how the staff have been treated, and this was agreed at last week's Health and Safety, the HR committee. We wrote that in the scrutiny report, the council's decision to outsource the remaining intermediate rehab centre in East Bristol to Saronno, and would ask if the staff were being informed of this. Also, GMB would request whether or not a decision has been already made by the council regarding the outsourcing of Redfield Lodge reablement intermediate care, as well as this is all under section on page 8. We would not support any decision to outsource existing services, as transferring staff to another employee does not either improve or make the delivery of the service any more cost effective, possibly even more expensive. If there are issues, then surely the first focus should be upon management, how they can deliver the service rather than outsourcing it. We would hope that the council would have learnt the lessons over the years of outsourcing and then having to bring services back in. We'd just like to emphasise the fact that please look at how the previous staff were treated and don't apply that going forward, and look at savings in-house rather than outsourcing everything in one go. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the public for all of their statements. If we can move on to questions now. We have about 22 minutes left for questions. So some people have several questions in. If you can limit yourself to just a maximum of 2 supplementaries, it'll give us more chance to go through. But if we get through them all and there's a little bit of spare time, I'm happy to return to the 1 or 2 members of the public who have multiple questions in, so they can perhaps ask another supplementary. So Jen Smith, you have 5 questions in over questions 1 and 2. Did you have a supplementary to any of your questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a couple of supplementaries. So for my first question, shall I just launch into my supplementary?
Yes, if you could just say which question it's a supplementary to, that helps us.
So this was question 1, I think. It was about the SENDIAS. My supplementary question was, the report states I was there as a Bristol Parent Carer Forum member, but this is not true. So to claim otherwise in an official report in this arena is defamation. Why has the council knowingly done this? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll ask Nancy to respond to that, because you're the solicitor in the room, if that's okay.
So the information that we were given was from officers. So if that's wrong, then we would need to go and look at that. So I'll have to look into that and verify it. And then if that's right, I will write back to you and correct the information.
Thank you very much. Do you have a second supplementary? And if so, can you say which question it's to?
Yes, I do have a second supplementary question. It's for question 3, which is about the council's own policy on social media surveillance in the Children's Services Procedures Manual. So my supplementary question is, does the council only use its own social media account to view and collate data from social media, or do individual staff members use their private accounts instead or as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to answer that? Nancy, I think because you're the author of the report, do you want to tackle that? I'm not too sure you would actually know the answer.
That's not something that would be within my knowledge, Chair. I think that's something that officers would have to talk to if they could indeed.
Richard or Vicky, do either of you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so information is regularly collated by the the comms team as part of their, you know, when we're hashtagged and things like that and things, so that would come up and that would be part of their day-to-day work. So that would be our usual council practice, to be looking to see where we're referenced in those sorts of things. In terms of individuals, we would never be asking individuals to collate that information on their own or through their private accounts.
Okay, so I think the official answer is that as far as officers are aware, they would have been using council accounts while logged into the social media. Anyway, next up, next set of questions. Is Lucy White here? No. Suzanne Audrey? Oh, Suzanne's not here. Adele Green? No. Charlotte Robertson? No. Ian Hemming? No. Kay Galpin? No. Lottie Lane? No. Hayley Hemming? Hayley, did you have any supplementary questions?
My question wasn't answered, Chair.
Would you like to repeat your question for an answer?
Sure. So on the 1st of September, Bristol City Council was informed that Data Subject 1, which was myself, had joined the forum pending checks and references so that the public may understand any rules that I was bound to regarding the forum rules and any DFE rules. Please can Bristol City Council clarify on which date that I signed my contract, joined the steering group and became an officer of the forum?
I'll go to Nancy, but I suspect the answer is that you do not know that.
Is this a question that was put after the first? So is this the second lot of questions that were put? So we haven't had a chance to actually look into that. That's the ones that we're going to answer subsequently, Chair.
So I'm afraid I believe the answer is still that you will have to wait for an answer following this meeting.
I think I already know the answer, Chair. The council don't hold the information, so they don't know when I was bound by what terms.
I would imagine what you've just said is correct. I'd be surprised if they did have that information. Did you have any other supplementaries, Hayley?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Kerry Bales, I know she's not here. Julie Wilson? No. Hannah Summers and Amy Valencia?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got their question. Will Bristol City Council's Education Department be reviewing the catchments and admissions of Bristol secondary schools as a matter of urgency, taking more ownership of administration and ensuring all academies are working together to ensure all postcodes and areas of the city are served by at least one school?
Richard, did you want to answer that?
I was actually going to cover that later on in the agenda anyway, but I can confirm that is what we are planning to do from October. So there will be, obviously the two new secondary schools is slightly different, but there will be discussions starting with schools around their catchment areas. And obviously the information that we've received from the two parents will form part of that discussion with us.
Thanks. So to pin that down, that would be a review for the 2024 intake then?
Yeah, it obviously takes quite a lead-in time for things to be changed, but the conversation is starting now. So it would be the following year, yeah.
Thank you very much. Did you have another supplementary, Councillor?
But would I be able to get that answer in writing for the residents, please?
Yeah, that will be put in writing, obviously, when we respond to these questions.
Thank you.
Right, so going down through, Bristol Parent Carer Forum.
It's the second set of questions that weren't answered, Chair.
Did you wish to repeat the question?
If I can find it quickly. Which question is it? Is it 13? 15.
15.
It's a very long question. It concerns the HCPs pretty much. We're just really concerned that there's no strategic involvement. The community groups are not quite the same thing as co-production, and we just wondered how it would work going forward. There doesn't seem to be any clarity.
Thanks. It is actually quite a long and in-depth question, which I think involves several pages of information. So I think rather than try to hammer out an answer here, we'll look for a more in-depth answer to be sent to you. And obviously, any of these answers will be copied to all members of the Commission as well, so they will get to see it. I think what we can do is we will also add those answers into the minutes of the meeting, so they will also be published publicly. It may just take a week or two to do that. So I think if that, oh, yes?
If we have a follow-up, could we bring it to the next scrutiny meeting?
Of course, you can. The only warning I give is that we can only hold 3 scrutiny meetings a year, so it will be in a few months' time, probably December, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Finally, Laura Drake. No. Jen Smith, I know I reduced you down to 2 supplementaries. Did you have any other supplementaries you wish to ask?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I've got 2 more supplementary questions, if that's okay. So my next supplementary question is regarding, I think it's question 2, about the reasonable adjustments. So the response to the question says that tweet surveillance did not involve any specific interaction with any of the individuals concerned, but that's not true. Tweet surveillance continued all year as is shown in the bundle. Why was the Equality Act adjustments not used in a meeting where top council managers called my social media presence and council statements derogatory and aggressive? Thank you.
Thanks. I may have missed it. Was there a question in there?
Why was the Equality Act adjustments not used in a meeting where top council managers called my social media presence and council statements like these here today derogatory and aggressive? They said that to my face with no reasonable adjustments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, Nancy, I think I'll turn to you as the... Oh, Hugh?
Yeah, I mean, as we've noted in the response, reasonable adjustments tend to apply primarily to ensuring our activity and the places that we operate within are accessible, and states that we should make reasonable adjustments to enable access. And that includes how we communicate, and I think that's very important. I think what I'd like to say is that I don't think that reasonable adjustments as defined in the Equality Act 2010 do apply in this context, but I do think that we should still consider very seriously whether you or the group and members of the group do have additional needs that we should perhaps take into consideration. And I'm perfectly happy to discuss this subsequently, as it says in the last paragraph. We do want to communicate effectively with people. We are very keen to co-produce, and in order to do that, however we can arrange our communications, it would be a positive thing for us to do.
Thank you. And Jed, I think you have one final supplementary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my final supplementary question is, thank you to the Executive Director for confirming that reasonable adjustments don't apply to council meetings. That's everything. Thank you.
Okay, I think that was a statement, not a question, but that's fine. The good news is we've actually finished public forum within the 30 minutes, so we're slightly less tight on time. So before we go into the report, just to explain to councillors, to try to save time in this meeting, because we've had to add in a whole additional report, we've asked officers not to do a presentation. So this is working on the presumption that you yourselves have actually read the report. What I will do is I will turn to the officers just to see if there's anything they want to say sort of for 30, 40 seconds before we go into questions. So my plan at this point is that we've got about 40 minutes and we will really have to curtail it to around 40 minutes or we will lose items, quite a few items off the agenda to discuss this. What I was going to look to do is to take questions up to the first 20 minutes and then open up to a debate or any motions for the last 20 minutes. So if people have questions, now would be the time to do that. Just before then, yeah. Just quickly do the annual business report. Oh, annual business report. Oh, right, okay. We'll come back to that. Yeah, we'll do that. Sorry, it's been pointed out to me that I've been over eager and we've got the annual business report to deal with. So we will go to that first. It's agenda item 7. And of course, this is the joy of using technology. Ian, do you want to very briefly just introduce the annual business report?
I don't think it will take very long. The report essentially sets out the membership of the committee and the terms of reference and the dates of meetings for the year ahead. So there are no decisions. It's purely for noting, but it's just for the record if the committee would like to note.
That's fine.
information.
Is everyone happy just to note that and then we move on? Great. Okay, so back to where we were, I believe. So we're next is agenda item. I can get it come up on my screen. So that was 7, so it must be on agenda item 8, I would imagine. So agenda item 8. So this is the social media monitoring report. Hopefully we've all read the paperwork and we've seen the report from the officer. Nancy, was there anything you wanted to add before we open up to questions?
Not specifically, no, Chair. Only to say I apologise that the co-author of the report was not able to be present today. Like other members, he has other commitments that he can't get out of. So we may not be able to answer all of your questions, for which I apologise, but we will get written responses to you as soon as possible.
Thank you. We're aware, obviously, adjourning this meeting or postponing this meeting, creating new day has created a severe problem for lots of people. First off, then, let me look. Do any members have any questions they'd like to ask? Great, I've got Christine. If I can ask members to keep their questions to just 2 or 3, and if you can keep them short, and then if we can ask officers to also keep the answers short and to the point, that would be great, and we can get through business. Christine.
So in reference to paragraph 15, right at the bottom, it says external communications team and the service area were familiar with both, meaning data 1 and data 2, by virtue of their social media posts relating to Send. That was before either so there were these concerns before the parameters within which your fact-finding report is aimed at. Why is it that you didn't ask the question, how is the Send team familiar and where do those concerns come from?
So I think we did ask officers, and I think it's in the report that there were tweets and communications that people were aware of on an ad hoc basis that's referred to in the report that didn't, in our opinion, amount to monitoring. But that's the basis on which there was a general awareness because of previous activity. And so basically what we've said in the report is it's not our remit to look at the veracity of those, just that they existed, which was the basis on which the 2 specific incidents that we were looking at, that was the background, if you like, to the basis on which the 2 incidents that we were looking at was based.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, why was it those 2 particular times? How did you come to the conclusion that it was that particular point in the autumn and that particular point in the spring? How does that decision come around, that it was that time frame?
That is my understanding of where the concerns related to in relation to the collation of... That was that there were 2 incidents that we found where there had been collation of social media input from the 2 data subjects. And so those are the 2 issues that we were specifically looking at, because those are the ones that had been identified to us. And we didn't find any other evidence of any other collation, only what we were talking to, that more ad hoc knowledge from social media, our comms team monitoring the council's Facebook pages.
Okay, moving on. So at various points throughout this report, it refers to both data subject 1 and data subject 2. At what point did data subject 1 become a formal member or have a formal role within the Parent Carer Forum?
I think that that's in the report.
Yeah, it was January 2022. Yes. So my question is, why is it that a member of the public is involved previous to January 22 and being referenced previous to January 2022 in relation to their social media posts when they had nothing to do with the Parent Carer Forum.
I think it was. I think it was basically the evidence in relation to the activity, and it was, again, it's the background in terms of why there were concerns because of the previous activity that had taken place. We weren't there to look at the veracity of those, simply that's why officers had those concerns.
Christine, do you have one more question?
One more, sure. Okay, I just need to find the paragraph. Well, it's the paragraph related to the Sendias meeting. In answer to the public forum question, you said that you only spoke to officers. And so presumably you've used the word confidential in your fact-finding report because officers reported to you that it was confidential despite the fact that anyone that had access to the internet could access Eventbrite around the planet and therefore book a ticket. Is that correct? Did officers tell you that it was a confidential meeting? Because that's the word you've used in this fact-finding report.
My understanding of the meeting was that it was held, that the rules of the meeting were that it was information shared in the meeting was confidential. It wasn't a confidential meeting as in, I think people could be invited through Eventbrite to the meeting, but that the ground rules of the meeting were that it was a confidential discussion to enable full and frank exchange of views.
Can I just follow up? Okay, just to follow up then. So from a legal perspective, and is your legal advice therefore to your officers and us as members that therefore is a confidential meeting in the sense that we would understand confidential?
It's not about my legal advice, it's about looking at the facts. No, so I'm saying my answer to your question is that it's not about my legal advice, it's about looking at what happened and looking at the information we were given. It was reported to us that it was a confidential meeting. We've looked into that and whether it was a confidential meeting, and we've said that the information in the meeting was there, the ground rules were that it was confidential in a lot of ways, in the same way as a lot of meetings are, that the discussions within that remain confidential. And that the concerns were that understanding that tweets had been made.
Thank you. Tony, I see you've indicated you've got some questions.
Yes, thank you. Paragraph 49 near the end of the report, the last paragraph says that it refers to the Information Governance and Security Team. Could you explain what the Information Governance and Security Team is within Bristol City Council?
So this is a team that's been specifically set up to ensure that the council complies with all the relevant legislation and rules in relation to information governance, and it's divided into teams that look at freedom of information, data protection, and subject access.
Okay, thank you. And a follow-up question to that. In that paragraph, you say it was flagged to the Information Governance and Security Team, and as a result of that, they determined that there wouldn't have been a need for a DPIA. Was that the first time that that team had been made aware of what had been happening previously back in, as far back as autumn 2021?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Right, so that corresponds with paragraph 31 where it says there's no formal decision to authorise the gathering of social media posts?
Yes, that's right.
Right. Okay, my next question refers to paragraph 35 to 39. I won't read out the entire paragraphs. But essentially says that Officer C was asked to produce an options paper, and what I can gather from reading the paragraphs previously is that this expressed concerns, some long-running concerns about the forum not being properly representative, but also more recent concerns about the campaign activity. This may not be a question for you, Nancy, it may be a question for somebody else, but did that report include some examples of the social media posts that were causing concern as part of its evidence?
This is the options paper that you're referring to. So I have to say my colleague, Nick, would have been looking at that and he would have read that. I haven't looked at that myself, so I can get back to you on that.
Is there anybody else in the room that can answer that question?
I don't think so. No.
Okay,
no,
thank
sorry,
you.
Thank you. Councillor Stone?
Oh, sorry, yeah, okay. I'd just like to just refer to paragraph, again, 49. I just want to know, it says here that there's, obviously you've decided that there's no evidence that systematic monitoring took place in that paragraph. And then you go on to say that that you've decided that there are some kind of campaign activities within those messaging, social media messaging. And the Bristol City Council have obviously raised this idea of campaign activities. What I want to know is, what do you mean by campaigning activities?
If I could come in and answer that one, thank you. So it is a very nuanced area, and if you have a look at some of the written responses to the questions that were submitted for today, you'll see that there is an answer to a question around that. I can't remember off the top of my head what question number it is, but it is a very nuanced area, and it is something that both Contact and the DFE haven't produced specific guidelines around, but there would be an expectation that the various different groups and forums would really think about these sorts of issues, and how, for example, they might decide that there are certain areas around the SEND agenda where there might be a conflict of interests if they continue to work around co-production in those particular areas. So if I can direct you to the more written responses as part of the packs, they will have that breakdown in terms of some of those nuanced discussions around campaigning and co-production.
Thank you very much. I've got another...
Sorry, Councillor Stone, I think Hugh wanted to come in.
I was just going to say very briefly, it's in response to question 1 from the third lot of questions from Lucy White. Page 5 of the questions document.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
I've got a second question. It's about paragraph 51. Paragraph 51 goes on to say that it says it's quite apparent that the amount of time in the question was negligible and justified on the basis that it enabled an informed decision. So what I'm trying to say is that would you consider that confirmation bias? Is that you're using something that's negligible, but you've used that to literally confirm the fact that you're going to withdraw this funding? Do you think that's fair?
I mean, I can comment on that very briefly. I think it's just as part of a whole lot of information, you know, a whole lot of knowledge that had been gathered around the time. I mean, I don't think necessarily that that point's being made to say that it's only a small amount of information. It's just being made to show that significant amounts of officer time weren't committed to looking at people's social media, because they weren't.
Councillor Stone, did you have one final question?
Well, the thing is that I think there's a possibility that there was some time spent on those social media posts, and then you used it to withdraw funding from an organisation that you are deciding are campaigning against the way that SEND has been utilised and used, has been organised and managed.
Well, okay, yes, Councillor Craig, you can respond.
So I totally want to rebut that. That was not the reason. I think if it may not be totally in this report, but we have had for quite some time been trying to work with the Parent Carer Forum over a period of time. This particular the social media protocols was just one of maybe a whole series of other issues that we needed to contend with. And in spite of all the efforts and interjections by outside bodies and others, I made the view that it wasn't, despite all the efforts from all concerned, I didn't think we should continue with that relationship, and that it should be opened up for commissioning at some point. And that's why we also have the consortium of groups, so that we can make sure that we have a very inclusive and diverse voice of parents from the SEM world, in addition to what we have with Parent Carer Forum. So there is no one particular forum. We now have the consortium of groups, and over the next few months we will look to developing further the relationship that we have with those 22 organisations.
Can I just say that those issues were prior to the previous leadership?
Sorry, the public can't speak at this point. Okay, thank you. Councillor Stone, I'm running tight on time. Did you have a very quick follow-up? Otherwise, I want to move on to Councillor Wilcox, and then I've got myself.
Well, my follow-up to that is, were you actually listening then to the Carer Forum, or actually hearing what they had to say, if you were obviously in consultation with them to try and overcome these obstacles? Because it sounds like you probably weren't.
So, indirectly, but I had feedback from the officers. I looked at all of the reports that we had in relation to what had been going on. So I may not have spoken to the Parent Carer Forum directly, but as a result of what had been ongoing for the last, I think it's like 2 years, I took a decision that we would no longer support the forum.
Thank you. Councillor Wilcox next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to paragraph 48 and the definition of what systematic and monitoring means. We've had examples of tweets from the Chopsy account being given in public forum, and they were over from the 17th of January to the 3rd of May. That's a period of over 5 months. And I do know for a fact that Chopsy tweets about other things than SEND, because I follow her on Twitter. So there must have been some sort of systematic plan to look and filter her tweets for SEND evidence. And that constitutes monitoring, in my opinion. Can we have a better definition here? Because I don't think this meets... You're saying that systematic monitoring did not take place, and I think it did, judging by the tweets that we've been presented with today.
Nancy, I think that's probably a legal question.
So I think what I would say is that from what we've been able to gather from officers and looking at the documents that we've seen, the tweets may have been over a period of time, but they were only accessed on a specific occasion. So that means that it wasn't systematic, if you see what I mean. That those tweets weren't being monitored throughout that time, but that we saw there were 2 occasions on which officers were requested to look at those accounts and to gather that information. So that's what that's why we said it wasn't systematic, because it was 2 specific occasions.
So, Councillor Wilcox, do you have another question or follow-up to that?
Yes, I do have a follow-up. So it was over a period of time. So that meets the monitoring specification of how you define monitoring, and you did actually feel that you need to look at these tweets. So it was a deliberate action or a determined way, as you classify it here. I just
Sorry,
think that you're avoiding the statement about it being not systematic when it is actually systematic.
I don't think I'm avoiding it with respect, Councillor Wilson. I just think we disagree. I'm saying we saw 2 specific occasions where 2 distinct occasions where officers had been asked to look at or see if there was evidence of, and those specific occasions we did not characterise as systematic, which would be over a period of time. So we don't have to access those tweets on the day that they were made. It's just gathering the information at that specific point in time. So that's the conclusion that we came to.
Thank you. I've got a very long list now of people who want to ask questions. So what I'll do is I've got a couple myself, then I'll go back through. People who've previously asked questions, you're at the bottom of the list. You might get a small chance to come in with one very quick one at the end. So just, I have some very, I think, brief questions, which are probably quite easy to answer. Is my understanding your terms of reference then, when looking into the monitoring by BCC, was for these 2 specific individuals? You specifically did not investigate other social media monitoring, even of other members of the Bristol Parent Carer Forum. Is that a correct assumption?
I'm just going back to the report. Yes, it was around that. It was the first occasion was, yes, it was in relation to those 2 individuals. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. The report seems to paint a belief or a picture of BPC officers not being trustworthy and campaigning in their roles as BPC officers. Seems to imply that they may have also leaked confidential information. Was there any credible evidence presented to you that endorsed any of these beliefs?
Sorry, Chair, can you repeat that?
So throughout the report, it's quite clear that there's a belief by some of the people you've interviewed that that people are campaigning, possibly in their role as Bristol Parent Carer Forum officers, and also an untrustworthiness is also painted, that they may leak confidential information. I was just wondering if you actually saw any actual real evidence of this as a lawyer that you would be happy was solid evidence that backs up those beliefs.
As you were aware, Chair, we weren't asked to look at the veracity of the beliefs of officers in relation to the campaigning, and as we've said, in terms of campaigning, we didn't look into, as we say, didn't look into the veracity of that, simply into officers' beliefs. But looking at the report, we can say that whether or not the 2 individuals were campaigning as part of their role as members of the forum or not, and you'll have heard from my colleague here that that's a very nuanced area about, when it's within their personal capacity and in their capacity as members of the forum. There was certainly some evidence of campaigning that we could see that officers may well have believed that to be the case. In terms of untrustworthiness, we didn't look into the comments or the beliefs that may have existed about that. No.
Thank you. Finally, the dossier that was prepared for the Director of Education with her meeting then with Bristol Parent Carer Forum, I've obviously seen some of the stuff within that dossier, and I guess I have to be slightly cautious on what I say about it, but I couldn't help but leave with the impression that it was riddled with errors. It was horrendously factually inaccurate in many, many places. It concerns me that this was then used as evidence. I was wondering, though, in looking at that dossier, and it's been mentioned in public forum as well, that there was one part of it was regarding 5 parents, and there was a reference to a zip file or something regarding emails, and that one of the data subjects have been acting as an advocate on behalf of those 5 parents, and they've been recruited via a Facebook group. Yet, as has been said, the Facebook group is a closed Facebook group, so actually officers would not be allowed to be in that Facebook group. Would you say that if that Facebook group had actually, officers had entered that Facebook group to gather evidence, then that itself would be a breach of the REPA Act, as that is a closed Facebook group, with a clear notice that actually officers, in fact, I myself are not a member of that Facebook group, because I interpret that notice to mean that I myself should not join it.
Chair, we'd have to look into that, because we, in our questioning of officers, they were clear that they had not accessed any private groups or used their own personal accounts to do so. And that dossier that you refer to, that was prepared at the request of the director, obviously was what we were looking at in terms of information that had been collated prior to, we weren't party to the collation of that information, so no advice was given at that time. But we'd have to look into how that information was accessed, and whether it was accessed indeed or simply referred to.
Thank you. Because the only other explanation is, of course, that it's a false statement, that actually what's claimed is not true, that was actually made up. Because either you would have had to have been in the group to know that that is the case, or in fact, what's been stated there is not actually a true fact. I mean, I'm not saying it's made up by you, but within the evidence of that document. I mean, it's not the only thing which is clearly inaccurate. There's a claim that one of the data subjects runs a very high-profile Twitter account, well known in this city. I would say virtually everybody in the council knows who runs that Twitter account, and this was assigned to one of the data subjects, which clearly is, I would have said, close to laughable.
So again, Chair, what I simply say that we need to, I'd need to go back and look at exactly what that was, how that had been collated.
Okay, thank you. I'm aware I'm hogging time and I need to give over to other people. I next had on my list Councillor Weston. If you can limit yourself just to 1 or 2 questions, that'd be great.
Thank you very much, Chair. And actually, I was about to go on the Facebook group. I have to say, this whole discussion is reinforcing my delight that I'm not on Twitter. It's on this issue with the Facebook group. Throughout the answers to Lucy and the answers to Suzanne, and then you've got things like nuance and possible conflict. It's very open to interpretation. My own view is obviously it's been interpreted one way entirely, so it's not really open. But if we're talking about monitoring, and if we're talking about systematic and surveillance and everything else, and we're just saying that it's not happening, how can you say that and at the same time somehow someone has gone into a private Facebook group and got information from it? That takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of forethought, surely. So this is what's concerning me, is actually, maybe it's because I'm on Facebook more than Twitter, but how and why are they in there? That is not open to interpretation at all. They shouldn't be in there. And this is what's having me concerned, that that hasn't been properly investigated. That comes back to my moral compass point earlier.
Thanks. So, that might be more of a statement than a question, but did you want to reply?
So, sorry, Councillor Weston, what did you say?
This private Facebook group that seems to have access and information came from the dossier. It's alluded to in the public statement. I haven't actually read the dossier, so I have no information on this. But it's concerned me that somehow information from a private Facebook group, to which officers should not be members, it's actually quite clear in their stats, have information from within it. Now, if they've got information from within it, isn't that systematic monitoring?
I think there's a difference between systematic monitoring and surveillance, Councillor Weston. So if it's systematic is where it's being taken... Sorry? So if it's over a period of time, that's systematic. If somebody has gone into a private account where that's not public accessible, that's more in the realms of surveillance, and we found no evidence of either. But as I've said to Councillor Kent, we'd have to look at the specifics that you're relate, you know, how that private information came to be in that dossier.
Did you have any other questions?
I really think that needs looking at.
Councillor Hants.
It's around this systemic thing. I mean, clearly, officers set out to gather evidence to support a particular point of view. And I don't understand how that's not systemic. Could you help, please?
So, I'm sorry, I can only repeat what I said to Councillor Wilcox, which is that systematic is over a period of time. This took place on two specific in relation to two specific requests. So that's the basis on which we concluded it wasn't systematic monitoring.
Thanks. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Just to continue on this vein about definitions of surveillance and monitoring, the report says that there were only 2 occasions on which social media content was collated, yet reading back through it, we see occasions on the 21st of September, we have an officer sending a tweet. On the 30th of September, a social media search. 7th of October, a brief search on social media. On 8th of October, a different officer is emailing social media materials, and so on. You know, it's a bit. Some of the language is a bit ambiguous, but I count at least 6, maybe 8 separate occasions on which officers are viewing and sharing social media materials. And you've also mentioned previous ad hoc information taken from social media. So I was wondering how we resolve this apparent contradiction between the statement that there are only 2 occasions and then what seems like a pattern of repeated viewings of social media.
So I think in terms of ad hoc, that's where I'm talking about where there are, say, for example, the council has been, again, I'm not a Twitter user, so I'm not sure exactly how this works, but if the council has been linked into a comment, it will become, our comms team will become aware of it. Or if we're contacted about a particular issue, we will become aware of it. So that's what I mean in terms of ad hoc information being coming to the council. In terms, so that's not monitoring. That's just general awareness of information that's being sent to us. But in terms of repeated, again, I think we've taken the view that the times that officers were asked to collate information in relation to first of all the request from Contact stroke the forum itself, predating the involvement of the data subjects as members of the committee. So that was the first occasion, and then the second occasion, the request from the director in preparation for a meeting. Those were requests for that were in relation to a specific issue, and so that's what we're talking about. Those that wasn't systematic over a period of time. It was for a specific reason. So I don't think I can clarify any further, but I think if members would be assisted by further detail of how we characterise systematic monitoring, we can certainly do that. And also further detail about the law around that and the law around REPA as well.
Councillor Parsons, did you have one further question? I want to just warn members, we're going well beyond the time we'd allotted for questions, which just reduces down any time to debate or consider a motion. So, Councillor Parsons, any more questions?
Yeah, I wondered whether officers were aware of or familiar with Contact's co-production and campaigning guidance to parent carer forums. which makes it clear that not only are parent carer forums not prevented in themselves from supporting or raising awareness of local campaign activity, but also that there's nothing to prevent individual members of parent carer forums from joining campaign groups, and in fact recommends inviting eligible members of campaign groups to join the Parent Carer Forum. There are obviously plenty of examples of active campaigners being involved in co-production. So I wonder really why the emphasis on individuals being campaigners or engaging in campaign activity becomes the basis for this well, we're not going to call it investigation, are we? The information gathering on their social media.
Well, Councillor Craig, if you specifically know the answer to that, which is the guidance, which I've also read, which I should say Councillor Parsons is absolutely accurate in what he just says, because I've also read through that guidance, and it clearly does state, in fact, that Bristol Parent Carer Forums can be involved in campaigning, and clearly does state its members can. But does someone want to answer that particular question?
I can come in and answer.
Okay, it's fine. So, yeah, Vicky.
Is that working now? Yeah, thank you. So we have undertaken quite a detailed piece of work over the past 3 years to really try and move our work forward with all our parent carer groups. We do strongly believe, and I've said this many times, that by working together, there will be such strength in what we're able to achieve. And I think we've made some good steps towards really improving things so that we can work together. So, for example, over the past 3 years, we've been working closely with other parent carer groups as well. From other local authorities, we had colleagues step in and join us and work alongside us. And we've been working closely with Contact as well for advice and support. So officers are aware of the details, and we are aware that it is a tricky area, and we want to do some further work to enable us to move forwards and strengthen these pieces of work, because co-production absolutely runs through everything that we need to be doing across SEND, and we want to pitch that piece of work really right for our city. So yes, they do know.
Councillor Craig, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of make the point about campaigning activities. Of course, I have no issue about organisations campaigning. You know, I'm from the voluntary and community sector. I've been campaigning for many years, but also being able to work quite openly and transparently with the local authority at times. And I think, I suppose one of the biggest, as I said before, over the last 2-3 years, we've been trying to repair the relationship with parents. And I think, given the social media use, the campaigners' use of social media to openly criticise and name individual SEND officers was also a camel that broke her back, I believe, because you put a lot of staff were kind of.
Thanks for that. Have you actually got any evidence of that claim? Because there's no evidence of that claim in the report that we've read. Okay, councillors, I have got a group of people who want to come back for more questions. I want to be clear, that will be at the cost of any debate or possibility to consider a motion. So can I ask that you wrap maybe your question into a statement that you might want to make? Sorry, wait there 1 second. Councillor Craig.
No, I just wanted to make this point, make this point. And I know you've kind of declared an interest, and I know you have a huge interest in this particular area. And as you said, there's quite a lot of other things on the agenda to address. So, I would love to see us get to a point where we make a decision about how you want to proceed on this, because that some of the questions, as we said before, we can't respond to. We need more time to respond to some of the questions that came through the public arena. But I just feel that we are spending an extraordinarily inordinate amount of time on this one particular subject, given that you said at the very beginning of this meeting that there was a lot to get through. So I'm not sure why you feel the need to continuously expand on the time for this particular issue. We've addressed as many questions as possible, so I just want to know what point are we trying to get to at the end of this process?
Right, well, Councillor Craig, that's 2 minutes gone that we could have had for a debate, which we've now lost to listen to that. To be very clear, we have a very clear agenda. We're sticking to that agenda. We're now at risk of going over, and that's why I'm trying to move the meeting on. This is an important subject. In fact, we've received over 100 statements from parents today on that, because one statement was signed by 90 parents. So for you to think this is not important, I'm a bit surprised. But we have many other important items, which I'm very keen we get to. So I'm going to continue to move the meeting on, whether people want me to or not. So as I was trying to say to councillors, I'm not going to take any more questions. We're going to move into the debate, and I think we should actually come to a conclusion. We have limited time. I have written down here in front of me a motion that I wrote this morning. But before tabling that, did anybody else actually have a motion or specific proposal, which I'd be happy to hear rather than my own? Councillor Weston, then Councillor Townsend.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I'll just reiterate from your chairing point of view, it's actually not up to the Cabinet member what we debate. It's not her meeting. Second point, I'm very concerned with the allegation that Bristol Parent Carers have been naming officers in Facebook. Well, you said the members were naming it. I would like to see evidence of that. So I will be submitting that, or can that please be recorded as an official question from me, that I would like to see evidence of that. But the motion that I particularly wanted is, we actually have the OSM motion on page 1 of this pack, as it were. I'm comfortable with that, but I would actually say their motion I think we can use a lot of, but I think it should actually involve the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee as well at the end. So that was sort of where I was coming from on that.
Okay, Councillor Townsend, did you have anything you want to come in on?
Yeah, I wanted to, there's something about apparent long-term governance concerns, and this council then continuing to provide discretionary funds for the financial year 21-22. And so what I'd like to understand is what it is that the council didn't see in 21-22 that they wanted to when they provided that discretionary funds, which was of course on top of the grant that comes from the DFE. The second area is around the Send People's Report from 2020 that's referenced. I don't know what month it was, but we are now in 2022. So my question is, when did officers start to try to diversify, which the statement from people at that time, the onus was on officers to diversify. When did that start? And therefore, are we now in a place where we have where we've got that grant from the DFE actually being decided at the local level? Because my understanding is that we haven't. We are 2 years on and we still haven't. We're not in a position where that grant is part of local decision making. It's still held by contact, and that for me is too long.
Okay, we've gone back to questions, but very briefly then, that was February 2020, that report. I guess a very quick question, when did officers start working on alternative arrangements? Does anybody know?
Can I come in there? Thank you. So officers have been working on the piece of work around parent carers since the first Ofsted inspection in 2019, because that was an area specifically that taught. So area 5, serious area of weakness 5, was all about the fractured relationship with parent carers. So that's where the piece of work started, was really kind of looking towards how we can ensure that co-production runs through all the pieces of work that we do. With regards to contact holding the the DFE fund. I just need to clarify that they haven't held it for 3 years. They're just currently holding it at this time. Previously, it was held by Bristol Parent Carer Forum. Oh, sorry, I thought I'd heard that it had been held by Contact for the past 3 years. Sorry if I misheard that.
No, my question is in relation to the additional discretionary funds that this council and the CQC provided parent carers for the financial year 21-22. What I'm interested, and I think this is maybe for the debate, what I'm interested to understand is what were the expectations that the Parent Carer Forum were going to perform during that financial year in order to demonstrate whatever it was that you were funding them for?
Thank you. My understanding is, and I will have to go back and check, but my understanding that additional funding went to have a temporary chair from another local authority who came in to work alongside the Parent Carer Forum to work with them on developing the various different terms of references and processes and protocols. I will have to check that, but that is my understanding of what that additional funding went for.
That's my belief as well. So I want to move on now to a debate. Councillor Weston proposed a possible motion. I did review the OSNB resolution. The only thing I'm worried is that we've already moved on. In one sense, their recommendation was that it came to here. And so I think we do need to now move on. I've prepared a motion, which I prepared this morning. I didn't know if I would use it or not, because it would depend on the questions and the debate. I think what I'll do is I'll move my motion, because it gives us something to discuss. People can vote it down, get rid of it, whatever. Christine, if I can pass that to you, can you pass it around? And then I'm going to read it out to the room, and then I'm going to open it up to debate for people to debate. If it's not seconded, by the way, we won't be getting anywhere and we'll take something new. So let me just read this out to you. So People's Scrutiny Commission notes that there is to be a debate at full council. 1, we welcome some of the steps that have been taken to widen consultation, but feel this cannot be at the expense of high-level co-production with parents. 2, believes that great damage has been done to the reputation of the council, its relationship with parents, and not helped improve services through its social media monitoring activities, and endorses the call for a robust new policy on social media within the council. 3, notes the limited remit of the fact-finding report and calls on the Chief Executive and the Mayor to approve an external investigation into media monitoring of SEND parents within the Council, and for this to be carried out under the direction of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. I'll be more than happy to add the Vice Chair of this Commission into that as well. 4, it is very concerned at the lack of co-production with parents, so calls on the Chief Executive, and I put the Executive Director of Education, but I think it would be the Executive Director of People at this stage, to write to Contact and the Department of Education, indicating that they are now willing to sign the Memorandum of Understanding with the Bristol Parent Carer Forum, and will reinstate the Bristol Parent Carer Forum as the lead strategic parental co-production partner. 5, call on BPCF and BCC to work together to now build trust and work in co-production to improve services for all SEND children and adults in our city. 6, ask Democratic Services officers to send a copy of this motion and the report to the Ofsted Inspector. That's the motion I penned this morning with all of its typos and grammatical errors. Does anyone want to second that motion so we can actually move to a debate on it? Otherwise it will fall. Councillor Dyer, you're indicating.
Not to second it, but this is a People's Scrutiny Commission vote, so presumably it'll be members of People's Scrutiny and those subbing for members of People's Scrutiny will be voting.
I think you're right. The only people actually will be able to vote would be People's Scrutiny members, yeah, and the only people who could second that would be People's Scrutiny members. So I guess I will just check. Does anyone wish to second that motion, or shall I open it up? Councillor Weston. Okay, so it's seconded, so it's on the table. So we actually have a moved motion which is seconded. So that's where the debate is around. What I'm happy to do is to limit the debate and move to a vote in case someone wants to bring something different forward. But does anyone want to speak to that motion? Councillor Hants.
Thank you for doing this, Tim. I appreciate you must have had a sleepless night or something similar. For me, is there something we could also include around not curtailing the opinions and views, or whistleblowing, in effect, of members of this group, because I think there is an area of contention here around the nature of campaigning, a disquiet amongst many of us here about people within these groups not being able to voice their opinions. So this is a start, but is there something missing here about people not being silenced?
So you would like us to amend it and add a line along the lines of protecting the rights of campaigners and whistleblowers in this city? Something
along those lines, yes. I've fully formed it in my head, but I think you get my general drift.
As mover of the motion, I'll be more than happy to accept that line, so that can be embedded then it is part of the motion. So a line that People Scrutiny also believes we should protect the rights of, I think generally, of campaigners and whistleblowers within this city. Yeah? Okay, was there anyone else who wished to speak at this point? Councillor Townsend.
So I think it's about the reinstatement of the Bristol Parent Carer Forum. If we're calling for an external investigation that is cross-stakeholder, if we are before then, or at the same time as that, asking for the Parent Carer Forum to be reinstated, I would suggest that we're not being completely open and open-minded and transparent about what might be found by that external investigation. Because it may conclude that actually there was some activities that would mean the Parent Carer Forum wasn't the best or the most appropriate. That is a possibility. The remit, what we've got is so narrow, and if we're going to, what we want to do is open it up and have a much wider discussion with a lot more stakeholders to actually find some facts as opposed to what officers just say is the case, then closing it down and saying we're going to reinstate them as the Parent Carer Forum, I think is premature and possibly prejudicing and judging what we might find.
Councillor Weston.
I think Councillor Townsend makes a good point. However, I work on the principle you're innocent until proven guilty. I think this evidence pack has been collated in such a way that they have been removed as the partner. And what we're trying to do is put it back pending an investigation. So actually, that I see it as the reinstatement to see what comes out of that independent inquiry. So I take a slightly different view. I don't think we're putting the cart before the horse. We just simply put it in the horse where it should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that at the moment there is no strategic co-production partner. But hold on, I'm going to just turn to the officers in case I'm wrong in that belief that there currently is no strategic co-production partner.
Thank you. This is the piece of work that Contact are going to be working with us on. So it's about how we work with our community of groups. So we've got 22 different parent carer groups who are coming together, and it's still in the early days of growing and developing that piece of work. But what we are working to do is to actually have conversations with that whole group so that we can make some of the decisions about how we think about the strategic co-production pieces and how we actually divide that piece of work up across the various different groups. So it's a piece of work that is in traction at this time.
Okay, thanks. So I think the answer to that was yes, there is no current strategic co-production partner. Councillors, was there anyone else who wanted to come in? I wanted to briefly reply. I see exactly what you're saying, Christine. The only thing I would say is that the external investigation is more into the acts of the council rather than Bristol Parent Carer Forum. It is about social media monitoring, not whether or not actually Bristol Parent Carer Forum or its officers did anything wrong. That's how I would see the investigation being about, because so far I think we have seen absolutely no evidence at all that Bristol Parent Carer Forum officers did anything wrong. In fact, all of the evidence points to the way they have behaved has been perfectly acceptable regarding Contact DFE, because all of their guidance says, in fact, what they have done is within the realms of Bristol Parent Carer Forum. I accept, though, some people may see that the investigation was going to look at wider issues. I saw it more as looking at whether or not there was any additional social media monitoring, because someone's been brought up today, and whether or not that it was a breach of the law. I accept that our lawyers, their interpretation at the moment, based on the evidence they've seen, is that there has been no breach of the law. I would like to see that view from an independent person once they've also been able to look at the additional issues that we have raised today. That was probably where this motion was coming from. And for the time being, we think that I think there is a need for someone to be involved in that strategic level. So that's a high level where, and no offence to the cabinet member, where in fact cabinet members are rarely even involved in, which is often the sort of strategic partnership groups where throughout most councils in the country, a parent sits and is the voice for parents. And that, at the moment in this city, has been fulfilled by the chair of the Bristol Parent Carer Forum. And it's that bit I think should be restored. Councillor Dyer.
Just a very quick, myself and Councillor Wilcox are due at another meeting, so Councillor Wilcox is going to go and apologise for me, and I'm going to stay until the end of this.
Was there anybody else who wanted to speak? Yeah, Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, I have a proposal, thank you, Chair, around the social media monitoring, or at least viewing and accessing and sharing part of the discussion that we've had. The fact-finding report acknowledges that although the Council has a social media protocol, it doesn't deal directly with viewing and sharing third-party social media. And there's a recommendation that this protocol be reviewed. We're, I believe, also potentially going to be requesting an investigation into this activity. Now, it seems to me that in the absence of a protocol, if it's the case that the activity outlined in this report didn't rise to the level of unauthorised surveillance, that's kind of through dumb luck. We haven't got the processes in place to ensure that officers are viewing social media within their rights and their remit. So I'd like to propose that until such a protocol is in place and officers have received the relevant training, that they suspend any viewing and sharing of social media content from identifiable individuals.
I mean, that could be tricky, because there, of course, are people who directly tweet Bristol City Council saying, my bin's not been emptied. Can you please get my bin emptied? And then, in one sense, you've got to then share that information internally. Are you with me? There are perfectly legitimate service reasons why officers and the council uses social media. The question is whether or not we've stepped out of those bounds, I believe. Councillor Craig, I think you're indicating.
Yeah, it's in relation to the point that you're making about reinstating the forum as a strategic partner. As I said earlier, we have been trying to work with the Parent Carer Forum over the last 3-4 years, and from my perspective, I still feel that there are some fundamental key issues that still remain. And I don't have that confidence. I'll just put that out there. I do not have the confidence at this moment in time that the Parent Carer Forum are the right strategic partner at this moment in time. And that's why Contact have come in with the support of the DFE and the views that we had raised. And we are working through and with the consortium of groups. And they can and will be given a seat at the table. So until we get to a position after we've worked with Contact, I think it's very, from my perspective, it would be disingenuous to put that in when I, as a cabinet member, do not have that confidence.
Thank you. Well, the motion only asks you to consider it, so we can't force you to do anything. Anyway, we have a motion on the table. Councillor Stone.
I'd just like to come back on that. I mean, from what I can gather, what you had said here today, Councillor Craig, is that you hadn't directly communicated with the Bristol Parent Carer Forum before you made the decision to withdraw the funding. So first of all, it's like nothing without us, about us. Nothing about us without us, I think, comes to mind. And then I hear that there's evidence being collated to fulfil your bias to remove the funding from the parent, and now you're saying that you don't feel that you are able to work in co-parenting with this organisation. I think we need to actually substantiate.
Do you want to come back on that briefly?
No, that's not the point that I am making. we had several, and me, maybe not me personally, but through our Director of Education, have been meeting regularly with the Parent Carer Forum. So I took my advice from, and remember, before we even reached this decision, we'd already agreed that we were going to establish the consortium of groups so we could have a wider and inclusive and diverse group of parents around the SEN agenda. And over the months, so I took up post in October. It wasn't as if I think our first meeting was maybe December, January of this year with the consortium of groups. And during that time, our officers were still meeting strategically and one-to-one, and it was quite clear that the relationship was not working and was breaking down. So on the basis of evidence, information that had been shared with me, I'd seen the correspondence between our officers.
Absolutely. I can hear what you're saying, Councillor Craig. Yeah, you took the evidence from officers, but you didn't have. It wasn't a balanced view if you're not taking or looking or talking to the actual Parent Carer Forum. Well, it isn't,
a balanced
is it?
view that, well, you heard that the organisation was in a bit of a disarray, and somehow you're expecting me to continue to work with the organisation that was still in a state of flux themselves.
Thank you. I think I want to...
or wasn't complicit with your views.
Hold it. Sorry, we are now going over time, and I am aware there are other important reports on. I just want to sort of say that I'm not aware that the organisation was in a difficult position. It had elected new officers and was moving forward as far as I was aware.
Move to vote?
Councillor Weston, yeah, move to a vote. That was exactly what I was going to do. I'm going to put the motion to a vote. If the motion falls, you can move a different motion. The motion is as amended by Councillor Hants. Is there anything you needed, Ian, from us? Before I go to the vote, I will give way to Nancy.
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be really helpful if it could be really clear in the motion, or perhaps as an addendum, rather than amending the motion now, exactly what the committee is going to ask the Mayor to investigate, so that the Mayor and the Chief Executive are clear about what that would be.
Thank you. I think the motion is relatively clear, but if you need the Chair and Vice Chair to clarify that, we'll be more than happy to do that with you afterwards, and we will copy in members of the Commission to make sure we've not misinterpreted what they want. But that's perfectly reasonable, because we have debated actually what did we mean. So that's a reasonable point. Otherwise, I'd like to get this actually voted on, because I'm aware we're now impacting on the rest of our agenda. So, those people who wish to support the motion as amended, please indicate with a raised hand. Obviously, it's just People's Scrutiny members or people who are representing People's Scrutiny members. Yeah, thank you. And those who wish to vote against, I think that was unanimous, actually. Great. Okay, so we've approved the motion. We will get back to you on making sure we've clarified exactly what we mean on that, and we will copy in other members so they're aware of that. I think we've got a 5-minute break at this point, haven't we? Is that right? Yes, we've got a 5-minute break, everybody. If we can make it 3 minutes, we get 2 minutes back. But otherwise, I'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Thank you. I know that was a difficult debate, but I think we've got through it and we're all still mostly friends. Moving on then to agenda item number 9, which is the report from the working group on inclusion in mainstream education. So you've got a copy of the report. This was the working group of this commission last year. I'd just like to thank everyone who was involved, whether that be commission members, officers, and also those people who came along to give evidence to the commission. I thought it was very useful. We found a lot out and it was very revealing. We have quite a few recommendations within that report, and the one thing we felt from that exercise is there was a lot more to be done that probably needed to be followed up. I think that's something for this commission to have a think about, whether or not you want to debate that now or whether or not that's something we'll go away and discuss. Anyway, I'm moving the report. One thing we wanted to do as a strategy was to make sure everyone got to see this report. So I think in the recommendation is some of the places we'd like to take it. I think add to that would be Overview Scrutiny Management Board. We'd like to take a copy of the report. And we just wanted to make sure we put it down in front of people to say, this is some of the good stuff we found. These are some of the challenges we have found. And this is the whole section of area where probably extra work needs to be done. Anyway, does anyone else want to speak about this?
Just checking, we are still quorate, right?
Yes, yeah, there's two, four, there's loads of us, 6 of us, easily quorate. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. So there's also there was a public forum statement that relates to this work. Can I suggest that we set up some form of task and finish group to oversee the implementation and how officers are going to respond to this? And I want to point out what we still haven't got that I was requesting from the day this opened is a map of our city with the schools marked on that demonstrate the cohorts that attend those schools compared with the community in which they're geographically located. That has still not been part of the evidence base, despite numerous of us on the People's Scrutiny asking for that evidence. It is not beyond the realms of IT to put that data together, and quite frankly it does make me suspicious as to why that is something that has not been forthcoming from our officers, despite repeatedly asking for it over the course of best part of 12 months.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to speak on this? No, I mean, it would be good if Richard,
quite
if
happy
you
to
could take
organise
that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, and apologies if you haven't had it, but I will follow up, Councillor Townsend. No problem.
Because it would be useful, because what we wanted to be able to do is to be able to assess how reflective the schools were of the communities they were within. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely understand that. And I just wanted to make a comment about the report as well, in terms,
yes,
if
please
that's
do.
okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we will take the report away. I think we absolutely agree with the position in the report, and it aligns with the ambitions in our belonging strategy. So you won't be surprised that those areas that you've identified are areas that we've obviously identified too and we're working on. We've got some activity going on in the city already around some of these things, so it'll be good to be able to share some of that specifically. But also in terms of there are some particular groups which I think would find this really helpful. So the Race Equality Steering Group will be really interested in some of the work that's identified there around equalities and diversity particularly. And I also think the Excellence in Schools group is a good forum, and I think it would be good if some members of the group would like to come and meet Excellence in Schools and talk to them about the report in a little bit more detail. That offer is open to you.
I think we would love to take that offer up. I think that was one of the things we wanted to go around presenting the report, some of its findings, and very much then get feedback from people and try to get a bit of buy-in to this is what we need to do to get change within the city.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I'll make sure that it's put on the agenda. I think the first meeting is towards the end of October. So hopefully we'll be able to match up diaries so that can work.
That's great, thank you. So in conclusion then, I think what we've agreed is the recommendations within the report, but we'll also take it to Overview Scrutiny Management Board and also to where Richard has just suggested. In addition, Richard's going to go off and look for to see if he can progress those facts and figures for you regarding inclusion within schools and intakes. I think that was it, wasn't it? So are we happy to agree that? Oh. Yeah, sorry, that's a good point. I think rather than, can I just say, rather than us call it a task and finish group, which we're only allowed one of a year, maybe we have this as a regular item, and we'll need to bring this back now of leads for people's scrutiny, and that we will bring leads of people's scrutiny back, and we'll have this as a constant item on there. That forces us to ensure that we're talking with officers about how we're then progressing this, and then we can also decide ways to progress certain elements of that as well. Does that sound reasonable? That means we just don't take up our one task and finish slot, which we have for the year, which I don't think we've committed yet, have we? But I'm not sure. No, we haven't committed that yet. That's something for us to go away, I think, as leads and members of the People's Scrutiny Commission, to go off and have a hard think about what we want to do this year regarding task and finish. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Horncher.
I'm not sure because I'm new to this group. I'm only filling in for Brenda, and I read this thinking a lot of stuff. Are the unions involved in this as well? Because you mentioned school teachers training, CEO supply staff, and coming from the background that I do, and I've spent the last 25 years in one aspect or another of this inclusion kind of thing, from personal, from work life, from everything. One of the real problems is around the schools' biased recruiting. That's definitely there. It's just 100%. I can't even add to it. I've tried to get the unions to deal with it and they don't. And the other one was around bullying and the fact that it excludes children, and then the schools tend to deal with it by just sticking the children in the hub rather than teaching the other children how to include children. So there's a lot of stuff in here because it comes from my background, and I'm like, what? Because it's the first time I've read something like this, because I'm usually involved in planning.
I'll bring Councillor Craig in a minute. I think you wanted to speak. Just to feedback, I think you've now managed to identify the one group we did not speak to, which was the unions. I'm fairly certain we talked to nearly every group involved in education that we could think of, but I don't think we spoke to anybody from speaking to us as a union.
I'm talking from the point of view as being a senior play worker, working in a very deprived area, which had lots of ethnic minorities in it. I'm speaking from a school teacher that was a supply teacher for many, many years, has been to loads of different schools and knows the different things. And I was speaking from a point of view of how biased the system of recruitment is within the system. And also how low pay the TAs and those are, so badly paid they can't live off the salary. And we seem to, in this report, totally ignore that. And the staff turnovers of schools is enormous. It's shocking how enormous it is. And some of the stories I can tell you, you just laugh under the table. And all of that affects children and inclusion and relationship building and all those things. And I did the PGCE, which is just how stressed can you get? That's what PGCE is. It's not teaching you about children and inclusion and trauma and the child. As secondary school, I can't say for primary school. I was shocked at how bad it was because I'd done previous children's training before. And none of that's in that report. It's just not there.
Councillor Craig, did you want to come back briefly?
Yes, I did. Thanks very much for raising that, Chair. You'll know that there are a number of organisations or networks in the city who are trying to begin to address the whole issue about lack of representation, around the lack of diversity around teaching staff or the recruitment of diverse teachers. But in addition to that, I just wanted to add about the piece of work that we have begun at the end of the summer term. the youth mayors called for zero tolerance around school exclusions. It obviously triggers people, so we are we're turning that on top of its head and looking at how we can deliver 100% inclusion in our schools, and that's not just when we're talking about children with SEN, as across all the different spectrums, obviously, but you know, our belonging strategy, you know, identifies quite clearly that, you know, children and young people, we need our schools to better hold our children and young people, but there is a lot of work that also needs to be done in terms of ensuring that all staff within a school setting, regardless of whether or not you have a SENCO, have a better understanding, a trauma-informed practice, really hold the SEN agenda, whether you're a classroom teacher or a teaching assistant or you're the head, or absolutely, but also working with our communities and youth-based organisations, because one of the issues is about this off-rolling that is going on, or children being passed from pillar to post within some school settings. So over the next few weeks and months, we're going to be working with I've just been offered by another one of the academy trusts to want to work on a pilot program that looks at working towards 100% inclusion and how we roll that out in Bristol, so that we're actually seeing real improvement in our children, not only being held, but also in terms of I prefer the funding that we are delivering. You know, we're spending a lot of money around DSG and the money that we deliver through the EHCP process. I want to see the schools, as I said, holding our children and then being resourced appropriately to enable them to hold those children. But on top of that, there are still the issues that need to be addressed about, I think, if as a child, if I don't see myself in a particular profession, then why would I want to engage?
There's two things. My child is, if you see as a child, I don't see myself as a school teacher, not just a support staff. As a school teacher,
absolutely,
there's that. But there's also in some other schools where if you see the person in authority can be from all different types of backgrounds, that they also can't see. That's also really important. So white children seeing black school teachers being an authority is really important for their development further of the racism, because there's a lot of racism at schools. But the thing is, you cannot address any of these without addressing the workload of school teachers. And so many times I see this, the teacher should have done this, the parent should have, not the TA should have done this. But I know as a school teacher how many school teachers are leaving and crying and sitting in the staff room because they can't cope with the workload. And you can't address any of these things meaningfully unless school teachers actually have a time to take a breath. I'm not only talking about secondary school teaching. I don't know much about primary school teaching. If the teacher cannot even, you're dealing with 200 students, the average teacher of a DT department, for instance, going through, and you're there 6 months or a year, and then they change teachers again. And without working on the workload of the school teachers, you're just hammering more stuff on them, and I can see why sometimes they have a resistance. I'm not saying there isn't racism, I'm not saying there isn't stuff that they do that isn't right, because I've seen a lot of bad practice as well. But you've got to talk about, first of all, the salaries of the TAs and support staff, which is appalling. Appalling. And we keep on being banged on about doing more for less. I mean, TAs don't get paid school holidays. They only get paid statutory 4 weeks. So the salary you see advertised is not what they get. And all these things happen, and without dealing with that, you can't deal with some of the other things. You can't take an overstressed, overworked teacher and add more.
Councillor, can I just say, thanks for bringing that up. We will pass your comments also back to the leads. So when we look at that report, we will
Because
make sure
and
that
that's
those
what I'm-
elements are
that's
being
what-
reflected within
yeah.
the report. We did receive some evidence about diversity within teaching, and we certainly spoke to some teachers who talked to us about that issue.
Yeah.
Because I think there is an issue within
There's
our
a
city
huge
about
issue on
diversity.
bias.
Councillor Weston, did you want to speak, or are we happy to move off this report now? Okay, if everyone's happy then with what I've recommended, we will move on to the next report. Yep, great. Okay, so moving on then, 10, decision report of the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. Now, this was our EHCP case. Rather than debate this and then debate EHCPs again, if we're just happy to note that, if anyone wants to discuss that, then you can discuss it under item 11, which is the Educational Healthcare Performance Update. So you'll see the pack that's been provided by officers. I'd like to thank Vicky and Richard for that information. It's fairly comprehensive. Before we get into questions or debate, did you want 30 seconds or a minute just to frame this? Or are you happy for us to launch straight in?
I'm happy for you to launch straight in if you'd like to.
That's great. Well, shall I start? The one figure I couldn't see there, which would have been quite useful, is to know how many EHCPs are currently in the system. So, I mean, it was a figure we had back in 2019. So it was to sort of know how many are currently live, as it were. Do you have that figure?
Yes, so I think if you turn to section 3, should give you the overview of all of the cases. So we've got 328 that are within the 20 weeks, and then there's a column there that gives, so you might have to add that up, but I think, is it 605 EHC needs assessments?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I had not added those two columns up, and you're quite right. If you add those two columns up, you get to the number. So you think that's roughly just over 600 then?
Yes.
So we're in a slightly better position than we were back beginning of 2020, but not by a great deal. Would that be a fair estimate?
I think if I mean, one of the key things I'd like to sort of draw your attention to is the fact that we have been looking at, obviously we have had increasing numbers of EHC needs requests coming through, which, you know, we understand. What we are now trying to look at is if you look at that 90 on the right-hand column, that's 90 families that have waited more than 52 weeks for an EHCP to be issued. So we are now working slightly differently from the beginning of term. So we split our team into 2. So we are focusing on timeliness with one team and focusing on legacy cases with the other, because what we absolutely need to do is obviously we have to work on our timeliness. It's not good enough, but we also have a duty to make sure that we don't have these excessive waits particularly beyond 52 weeks. So we have been focusing on that as well. We've already made some difference to that. So that 90 is now, as of Friday, was down to 47. And all of those 47 have an assessment coordinator and a draft plan. So they should all have received their plans before the end of the calendar year, because we've got the consultation process to go with some of those as well. So those columns are part of what we're really focused on now, is that sort of looking at timeliness, but also looking at reducing those weights down and over time to really pull those weights down so that we're not exceeding our 20 weeks so excessively. I think at the moment there is always going to be a bit of a tension between our timeliness and trying to reduce these excessive weights that we've got. So looking at our target of 50% for our timeliness, that is looking challenging if we want to reduce these excessive weights. So we're looking at, we're forecasting that we'll hit 40% timeliness by the end of the calendar year, which is the SEN2 reporting period. But we will have no more families that will be waiting longer than 52 weeks for an EHCP. That is our aim by the end of this year. We know it's not good enough. We know we've still got a lot to do, but we feel it's right to sort of look at both ends to make sure that we're delivering a better system for our families. So I did have something I should have come up front with, shouldn't I? Because I've just said it, but I hope that's helpful, and obviously any questions.
Great. Just looking to other commission members. Did anyone else want to? Okay, so Councillor Weston and Councillor Townsend.
Thank you very much. And obviously, delighted that you've got the number 90 down to 47. That is an achievement, and genuinely well done. I would suggest, just thinking of this, in the same way that you were talking earlier on about taking something every meeting, I would almost appreciate almost a snapshot of that graph every meeting, just so we're keeping an eye on it as well, so we see what's happening. My question was, I just wonder, this was really depressing reading this report. It was. I understand the hard work going into it, but when you're looking at it and comparing it to the national average, to benchmarking, it's not pretty. Have any other core cities gone through a similar journey where they've had wait times which are pretty disastrous and managed to turn it around? Have any of them actually managed to do that?
Thank you, Councillor Weston. So we're in communication with lots of local authorities through various different groups that we attend. So the South West region of SEND group is one of the ones that we attend regularly. So there are various different cities that have tried various different initiatives, and we've really got alongside them and had a look and see what they've been doing and what they've been operating. One of the things that you'll see from our graph in terms of the progress, so 2019 we were having 0 produced within the 20-week time scale, and now we're on 33.9% being produced. If you have a look at that graph, it's actually a steady upward trajectory. Some other local authorities that we've worked alongside, their trajectory have been a little bit more spiky, shall we say. So one of the things that we've found as well is that if we divert resource, or if we focus in a very kind of targeted way, the finding is that, so for example, by getting some plan writers in, for example, to work with us, then you can get that really spiky profile because of the numbers of new needs assessments coming in and us trying to keep up with demand within the system. It means that as quickly as we've done a short-term intervention to clear backlogs, we can be back in that situation again. So what we've endeavoured to do over the past 3 years is to have a sustainable programme that looks at our 20-week timeliness, but also looks at the 52-week as well. So we're looking at the legacy cases plus the 20 weeks and making sure that we've got that steady increase. It's not fast enough for everybody, agreed, and we're working hard on that. We have got some extra staff come into place, and I think, as I've said to you all before, there isn't a qualification for SEND staff. So when somebody comes in new to us, we have to embark, unless they're coming in with experience, we have to embark on a significant training programme with them. So to kind of wrap that all up, we are working with other local authorities. I don't think we find anybody who's absolutely cracked it yet. In the conversations we have, we're all sharing the different interventions and the work that we're doing, but there isn't one straightforward answer or solution, and each local authority does have its own bespoke situations that it's looking into addressing. But we are endeavouring to use the best intelligence from up and down the country to make sure that we are employing those things in what we do.
Thank you, Vicky, much appreciated. You say it doesn't look like anyone's cracked it. Forgive me for saying it, looking like Portsmouth and Southampton are doing pretty darn well at it, and they're obviously geographical neighbours. You can tell that from the amount of hate they have for each other. My wife is from Portsmouth, so don't mention Southampton to my wife. Yep. So what are they doing so different? Or is it a case that they've got into a virtuous circle where they've managed to close the 52 completely, and then the 10 staff that are dealing with, should we say, the legacy, are actually at the front dealing with the 0 to 20?
Thank you. I trained down in Southampton, Mark. And I still have good connections down there in terms
May not be here, but she would expect me to do that.
In terms of Portsmouth and Southampton. And actually, Portsmouth were one of the first local authorities that produced the really clear articulation of the school-based stages of the Code of Practice, what we refer to as the ordinarily available provision. And we worked with Portsmouth and interrogated their document and the piece of work they'd done and the impact it had had. We're about 2 years behind them in terms of the development of that document, but we have it, it's embedded, it's part of our SEND culture, but actually that was one of the key things that we had missing, was that clear articulation of what's required at the school-based stages of the Code of Practice. So we've had conversations with them. We've looked at what they've done. We've developed our own version, which does have some similarities to the Portsmouth version. And certainly they have been putting quite a lot of time and energy into those school-based stages to really try and get that school offer right.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend, did you indicate?
I'm going to fly the flag again for reporting on annual reviews, because you cannot have an EHCP performance update if you're not telling us where we are on our annual reviews. This is simply what you're doing is telling us about the needs assessments and your final plan issue. 50% of your performance is not included in this report, so we need to start having that, Chair, because we have all had cases where children need different schools, or they're moving on from one key stage to the next, and the timeliness is not there with annual reviews.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. And quite rightly so, there's been too much, I think, attention and emphasis on that initial 20 weeks. And it's really important that we look at the depth and breadth of the other pieces of work that are continuing. So I would appreciate us being able to look at some of the in-depth pieces of work and maybe keep monitoring the 20-week timeliness piece. But there are other pieces of work that we really need to think about, and that is one piece of work that the services are engaged with, and there are others, as Councillor Townsend alludes to.
How do you monitor the annual review? So I'm thinking back through the process myself. So an annual review happens where a council officer occasionally may attend but quite often doesn't, and then that annual review is sent to the council, and then I think you issue a letter. What's your measure within that process?
This might be quite a long answer. I'll try and keep it brief. Okay. So the DFE has recognised that actually a lot of attention has been on the early assessment pieces and perhaps not as much attention on annual reviews. So from this year going forwards, the SEND2 reporting system is looking at individual child level information and is including reporting measures around annual reviews, which is a good thing. So within Bristol, we have delegated responsibility, as most local authorities do, all local authorities do, to our educational settings. We can't get to every single annual review to be able to attend all of them. And what we are conscious of is that we're trying to make a more robust system in terms of our quality assurances around annual reviews. Because what would happen is, so our officers write the initial EHCP plan, and then over time that's reviewed in schools and amendments are made by our colleagues within schools, and those amendments then come back into offices to then reissue the plan. So we've got a really skilled group of people in terms of writing those initial plans, and the Time for Change project has just started with the electronic portal that we discussed when we last met. And so there is a much greater emphasis on that piece, but we're aware that there's a workforce development piece that we need to do around annual reviews, making them person-centred, making sure the child and young person's voice is heard, and making sure that those plans after the annual review process are just as robust as they are when they're issued from the department first of all.
Thanks. And I believe that you require at least certain schools, possibly special schools, to do a monthly report on any EHCPs they have. Does that make sense to you? And if you do you think that is useful, or do you think that potentially is overloading the system with paperwork? This is what I think I'm declaring interest. I have a family member with an EHCP, which I normally declare at the beginning of the meeting, and I completely forgot this time. I'll also declare an interest, as Councillor Weston pointed out, that I occasionally have been known to support Pompey Football Club, hence my knowing the derogatory term for Southampton.
Oh, thank you. So I'm not sure about a monthly return, but certainly we are working with our special schools to make sure that those dates for the annual reviews are really seen kind of upfront, and we've got some data to be able to share around our key stage transfers as well, perhaps at a later meeting. One of the things that it is challenging to do is to measure the outcomes for children and young people with an EHCP. And this goes back to what Councillor Weston was asking about in terms of other local authorities and have we been to see good practice. So one of the documents that you'll see on the local offer is the Children and Young People's Outcomes Framework. And a piece of work that we need to do is to develop our data system so that we can measure outcomes for children and young people with EHCPs. And that will enable us to have the more robust information about how a young person is doing in relation to their plan. What impact is it, for example, having on their independent skills? So that piece of work is in traction. The framework is finished, but we haven't got the data and IT systems in place yet that will enable us to measure and monitor that work around outcomes. So that's going to really tie closely with the quality of what is happening within annual reviews and within the provision for children and young people as well, because it's not just about the quantity. It's not just about the number of annual reviews that we go to. It's whether those annual reviews are person-centred and include the child and young person's voice as well.
Thanks. I certainly spoke to our head teacher of a special school who said to me, and I can't recall if it was monthly or termly reports he was doing, and he did speculate, had anyone ever read them? And his point was it took up a proportion of his time, which then was billed back to the local authority, and this could be a saving. So it might be worth going back to find out, because gathering data can be useful, but also you can be overloaded with data, especially if you've got no one to look at it. And it's just a thought, if certain schools are being asked to report back more than, in fact, no one could humanly monitor, there actually might be a saving for you, because that was then being put into the cost of the EHCP processes and what they were billing the authority. It was something I always meant to bring up but never got round to, but as it was brought up I thought I would mention it, that's all. So it's something perhaps to just go back and look into.
Yeah, well, if you want to put me in touch with that head teacher, I'm
tired
more than
now.
Oh, okay. Well, I would be more than happy to pick that up. I think what might be being alluded to there is the reports about the number of places and the number of children on roll in the settings. That would have
maybe.
that would have the frequency.
It was being implied it was individual reports, but maybe I misunderstood. Anyway, it's off topic. Was there anyone else who wanted to raise anything on this? Yes, Councillor Stone.
It's just a quick one. When I read the report from the Ombudsman, it's just a quick issue. Surely that the whole kind of like complaint could have been averted if there was a communication straight from the beginning. So if that parent had a case officer right at the beginning and there was some communication, because the outcome actually was okay, wasn't it? She was okay with the outcome. She just felt that she needed to complain about the actual process. The plan was fine. So I'm just stating, I'm sure you have a measure where you will be allocating an officer to a parent as soon as they put in for an assessment. Is that correct?
This is where capacity is an issue. So as soon as it's possible for us to allocate a case officer, then we do. So what we do have is we have a communication strategy. So we do send out information, and this is where our parent bodies are really important as well. Our SENDIAS service and other voluntary agencies who our families can work with, and also the information on the local offer is really helpful. And also our SENCOs in schools are, fonts of knowledge about the various different practices and procedures and can help and support with those questions too.
Thanks. I guess, one, can I welcome the report? Two, obviously we are really concerned about trying to move forward here as a city and have EHCPs dealt with in a more timely way, and also quality EHCPs at the end with provision that matches. My concern is at the moment our processing numbers is not enough to deal with the amount that are coming in, plus the legacy cases. I mean, it would appear to me that we're currently, there is definitely an increase. So at the moment, it looks like we're hitting maybe up to 70 in a month, which is good, but we need to be sort of somewhere in the region of 90 to 100. So you're on top of the amount coming in and at the same time eating into the amount of legacy cases. Is that a target that you're sort of working to? I mean, what is your target for monthly amount of EHCPs you wish to be processing, say, by the end of the year?
So this is where we have to look at the whole system. So educational psychologists have to write a report for EHCPs. And we know there's a national shortage of educational psychologists, and there are local authorities who have vacancies that they cannot fill. We're very lucky here in Bristol that we have, when we put an advertisement out, we can attract quite a lot of attention in terms of this being a place where colleagues want to come and work. There are some local authorities that we've sort of been referring to as cold spots, where they've been running with 6+ vacancies. So we have to look at all the different parts of the system, and we have to think about the system on all the different steps and the way through. So we have increased our numbers of assessment coordinators. We have 5 new starters in September, and we also have had 5 new starters in terms of educational psychology as well. And we do need to really think in advance about educational psychologists as well, because adverts will be going out for trainee psychologists who are in their final year of training to secure jobs for September now, and some will have already done that actually. So I think bearing in mind some of the other pressures that we're under as an education department and also as a city council in terms of funding, it is a very challenging area. Would we actively be able to employ colleagues and have a full workload for them if we were able to do so? Absolutely we would.
I guess my point is, if we're not getting up to the point of EHCPs being completed, so 90 to 100 a month, you're not going to be able to deal with the legacy case. That legacy number is never going to significantly decrease, which actually means people will be stuck. Maybe you can manage it that they don't get into the over 1 year position, but we'll never really radically move forward. Because I'm also aware that although we do a comparison with the other authorities, it talks about the DFE cohort. And what that basically means is we're running at a slightly different statistical analysis as most other local authorities. We're taking people out of the queue, prioritising them, and I understand why that is done, but we are then comparing ourselves to many other local authorities who are probably not using that system. I imagine some are, but I suspect most are not. So statistically, a lot of people are waiting a very, very long time at the moment, and unless we actually are hitting a certain target of around 90 to 100 EHCPs completed a month, you're never going to get that backlog to go down.
Yeah, it is a challenge, yeah. And we're not up to getting those numbers done each month at the current time with the current levels of staffing. But again, going back to the point about are we looking at other local authorities and what they're doing? Absolutely we are. And our approach to trying to prioritise some of those children and young people where there are kind of significant medical needs, for example, we have actually learnt from other authorities and we've looked into what's been happening there. But you're right, the DFE data and the SEN2 data isn't really comparing like with like, and there are some issues around the methodology that I hope the DFE are trying to sort out at the moment, because there are different things that are reported on. So although it's really important that we do keep an eye on all those national stats, sometimes you can see some quite clear sort of outliers that make you wonder, you know, how closely some of that DFE methodology has been followed. We've built our data system up from scratch over the past 3 years, so we feel much more confident with our data and that our data is robust. And that is one of the pieces of work that we had to do to build on before we could then start reporting accurately on our information.
Just one, Chair, and this is just actually a request for information. In page 105, section 6, point 3, you say the council put a submission in response to the government's SEND green paper. Could I just have a copy of that?
So it was our, I can't remember what team. It was a particular team that actually compiled the report for us, but it was a big piece of co-production across the city where we actually worked with a whole range of different groups and parent carers to provide that response. So it is available.
I'm sure it probably is. I'd just like to see it.
Okay. Yeah, someone could get the link to
Chris
that
Duncan
to the Commission.
Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you. Well, if it's possible, you could send it to Ian as well, and he can then send it out to all Commission members. Thanks, Councillor Craig. Okay, I'll be happy to move on. I think clearly, though, one of the messages to us, if we wish to see those numbers drop, as a council, we need to look to be putting more resources into the team. I think that was, so that's a challenge to the administration, but to all of us as well. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the next report, and I will just get that up. So next we have the school provision and specialist placements update. That is agenda item 12. And who's introducing this? Is it Hugh or is it you, Richard? And do you want 30 seconds to introduce it, or do you want to go straight into questions?
Because otherwise I just come in anyway, won't I? Yeah, so obviously there are two areas of the report. One is around the secondary provision, and then one is around the specialist places provision. So in terms, I have got this on, haven't I? Yeah. So in terms of the secondary schools, these two schools are critical to us being sufficient in secondary places. You'll be well aware that Oasis Temple Quarter has been delayed for a long time. However, both are now are planned to open in temporary accommodation in 2023, September 2023. We are working with the DFE to support them with their feasibility works around the planning process to get the planning for the temporary sites. That is all progressing as it should at the moment. Both schools should open with up to 180 places each. So again, really, really helpful for us to meet that sufficiency challenge. We're working with Oasis, who are going to be running both of the schools, Oasis Trust. The admissions process, they will run the admissions process outside of the bulk admissions, as we did with Trinity, but it will be aligned with the timelines. And we will, what will happen there is we will have offers to pupils going into year 7. One will be an offer for a Bristol school, and one will be a conditional offer for the new school, so that we'll then work through the process of assigning them after the process is closed. So we are working, like I said, we're working with the DFE to make sure that we move that sort of temporary planning forwards. The temporary site for Daventry Road will be at the Oasis John Williams site, and that is proposed for 1 year. Oasis Temple Quarter, the temporary site, is proposed to be at Spring Street, which will be for 2 years because the project is going to take longer to build because the Oasis Temple Quarter is a more complex development. So things are on track at the moment. We need these 2 secondary schools, yeah, I think I'll stop there because you probably want to separate the conversation about the 2 things.
That's a good introduction. Thank you very much. I have one question which I've become aware of. So parents applying now for secondary school places in the new schools will get a conditional offer.
Yeah.
And obviously that's going to have an impact throughout the system because they'll be given 2 offers.
Yeah.
And of course, if they're given us, so let's just take Oasis John Williams because that's in my ward, so I understand it. So if you're applying for the new Knoll Oasis school, you'll be awarded a place there, and probably at Oasis John Williams. But obviously that then takes a place at Oasis John Williams, which means other people will be knocked out. I guess my question is, at what point are we going to be able to firm those offers up? Because obviously that's going to have a massive disruption within the system.
Yeah. So that will be that is one of the challenges, and that happened with Trinity as well. So we do need to have those conditional offers. I'm just checking on my notes for that.
Well, we can come back.
I think I might have to come back to you on that with the detail.
But Chair, obviously that doesn't just impact the new children, it impacts other children who may have been trying to get into Oasis John Williams who weren't able to because they're having to hold an offer for the child for the new school.
Yeah, and a logistical, it's logistically a challenge for us to manage in admissions as well. But yeah, absolutely, we will be seeking to confirm that conditional offer as soon as is possible. That should be the whole thing is designed so that it should all be done before the offer of the places are put out. But yeah, I'll come back to you with the detail on that, because Ian could provide some more detail on how that's working, but he's on leave at the moment, so I can't ask him today.
Yeah, I've got to say, just as a statement, then I'll come to my question, I'm not sure I get the doing the two offers. I think you're actually going to have an awful lot of confusion down the line, and confusion for parents as well. I think you're going to slam completely your admissions team and trying to work their way through how this cascades down and around. I think you're creating a problem for yourself. So I flag a warning to that one. But my question was, we all know the issue of the secondary schools. Obviously, this is in the centre and it's in the south. Excuse me for being slightly parochial at this point. How are the admission criteria? How are the places breaking down in the north and the east? Are they, broadly speaking, can be accommodated within existing, albeit slightly expanded schools? Just curious on that. Yeah, so obviously there's a knock-on effect out from where the new schools are sited. The catchment areas for the two new schools are quite wide, so the aim was to avoid it disrupting too much other schools until those schools are in place. The idea is then to review, like I said earlier, in October we're going to start a conversation with all secondary schools around reviewing their catchment areas, and obviously the new schools can be factored into those conversations. You know, if Ian was here, he'd say it's a really complex and challenging thing to, you know, plan for where people decide they would like to go. You know, it's sort of, there's so many moving parts to it. But what we'll be looking at doing is when we offer places in admissions, there is always a knock-on effect from different things out through into the rest of the city. But by having more sufficiency in the Oasis Temple Quarter area and in the south, that will help relieve pressure around sort of East Central as well. So you'll get a knock-on benefit in the north of the city as well from that. But yeah, it's a challenge. And in reference to your admissions with the conditional offers, you know, our hands are tied in some ways. We can't offer a place for a school that we don't know absolutely will open on September the 2023 until we know it will. And at that point, we'll move from a conditional offer to a firm offer. And yes, it will be a lot of work for admissions. Yeah, they're looking forward to it.
Councillor Townsend.
So my question is in relation to the permanent sites for the two mainstreams, whether that's the part presumably is already being built. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
It is, yeah.
Is there in that design an element of specialist SEN inclusion within that site? That's the first question. Second question is, will that be the case for Temple Meads? I appreciate that we'll have a difficulty doing that while it's on a temporary site down in Southfield. I get that. But for the permanent site, and then my second question is in relation to, I mean, following up from what Councillor Weston has said, we've had representations from the chair of City Academy already about the impact, particularly of the East Bristol site, and the segregation that she can see coming down the line, and I can see that coming down the line, because that's what the system does. That's how admissions in this city currently work and have always worked. And so I suppose my question is, how are you going to get all of your academies and your faith schools that are still VA and LA controlled actually cooperating with this review?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when the two schools were initially set up, there was no discussions about specific SEND inclusion places. Is that what you're talking about in the school? As you'll know, that the conversations were several years ago. However, we have spoken to Oasis, who are happy to look at SEND provision within those schools once they've been delivered as physical buildings. So again, that we would pick up that conversation around, very much like we've done with our phase 1 and 2 programme of specialist places with the trust. But they have confirmed that they would be happy to look at that once the schools are delivered. In terms of working with our schools around the catchment areas, etc., that's obviously a piece of work that we're going to start We will be expecting all schools or trusts to engage with us. We are aware of some of the concerns, at City Academy about the sort of, how close Oasis Town Quarter is as well, and the impact it could have, and that will come out as part of the discussions. You are right to identify that academies are in charge of their own admissions in catchment areas, as are VA schools, which are both maintained. But we are seeking to work with them using the underlying principles of the belonging strategy to focus our discussions on what we expect from a catchment area for our secondary schools. And we seek to influence as strongly as we can during those discussions.
I suppose I just want to come back on that, really. I've got to express my disappointment that neither of these secondary schools are being SEN inclusion by design, by architecture. Special schools, facilities for children with additional needs are different to those of children without those high-level additional needs. And we're not going to get inclusion if the architecture's not there, and it sounds like the Daventry one is already done, so the architecture is just not even part of the thinking. That's the first point I'd like to make. A second point, I suppose, is we wait to see what kind of engagement we get. But if the relationships with our multi-academy trusts are as good as we're told they are by yourselves, and have been told by over the last couple of years, we won't have any problem with getting the movement we need in terms of which schools are offering places to which groups of cohorts of children. But I remain to be convinced of that.
Yeah, so in terms of the builds, obviously they will be designed in terms of being inclusive for mainstream education and for children with special educational needs who would have attended them or will attend them as a mainstream school. Christine Townsend, sorry, I'm calling you Christine, I shouldn't do that. Councillor Townsend, in terms of the specialist provision, I think we would agree, but if you think about what we've been trying to do with our phase 1 and 2 programme, we have been looking at making sure that we've got specialist facilities within mainstream schools, and that in hindsight would have been something that would have been very useful to have those discussions about. But similarly, we can obviously look at how there may be potential adaptations or changes to the schools in the future, and Oasis, like I said, have said they're open to that. I think in terms of the relationships with our academies, they have been fundamental in helping us meet our sufficiency over the last few years when we've had delays to our schools, and that has been because of our positive relationships with our academy trusts around that work. They have been very helpful in expanding and bulging to meet the needs of the city when the delays are not really, in terms of the delays to that was not of their doing, but they have risen to the challenge. I am expecting that we will take a similar approach with the catchment areas, and I am hopeful that our existing relationships will mean that we can move this forward really well.
Can I just briefly then, on catchment areas and admissions, can I just point you to our report on inclusivity, page 41, recommendation 2.4, under admissions policies, and just to keep this in the mind of officers, that we said there should be a citywide review of admissions policies with a view to enabling a fairer and equitable admissions process. This should entail education settings and the council working together to introduce criteria that recognise the need to serve local communities and enables better inclusion, including the local authority exploring how to encourage schools to implement criteria that provide an appropriate proportion of pupil premium student priority places in school applications when places are oversubscribed. So I think what we're saying is we would like the council to promote that as a high up within the admissions criteria of all of our secondary schools, that there be a certain proportion of pupils who have pupil premium. And that's because there was a strong feeling in the city that some schools were stepping up when it came to trying to make sure that their schools were diverse, and other schools were doing it less so. And that was the belief of other schools as well, and that they themselves had catchment areas, often of quite middle-class areas. And what that meant is that, of course, they had a particular cohort of pupils, and that meant others in the city were excluded then from their schools. So hopefully you can raise that, as well as, of course, the issues that we've heard from, I think, Hannah Summers, who's done a petition and written to us regarding catchment areas in certain parts of the city. Were there any other points before we move on? No? I think we're done. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, if that's okay. And the good news is we pretty much made back time, everybody. So that is good news. Agenda item 13, Adult Social Care Transformation Update. Julia, I think you're leading on this, and we've given you an exception. We've said that you can actually present your report properly to us.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will keep it brief, though, and thank you very much for the exception. So the report that we've provided is in two sections, because this is recognising this is the first time that we've done a report to the Scrutiny Commission since what we've called reset the transformation programme in adult social care. So we've taken a new approach. I haven't completely done away with transformation efforts of the past, but we have reset it and refocused it. So the first half of the report is giving you an overview of the structure of the programme and the focus of the programme, which is structured around 11 work streams and 4 what we've called areas of continuous improvement. For simplicity and transparency, we've put all of the savings for adult social care that are in the MTFP into the scope of the programme. But part of the reason that we've called some of them continuous improvement is that they're not truly transformational, but there is some significant savings expectations on them. So that's the first part of the report. Very happy to answer any questions that you've got on the programme as a whole. And then the second half is a kind of snapshot of the 1/3 of the adult social care service, which we call in-house services. So we've explained what those are and how they particularly relate to the transformation programme. We've agreed that it'd be good to have an area of focus for each of the Commission meetings, and what we've suggested is that the next one we focus on housing and adult social care, and the final one on the role of community and voluntary sectors. But in terms of in-house services, the key things from the report are that Bristol it's the bit that includes lots of the items around adult social care that aren't, we're not obliged to have it, they're not necessarily statutory requirements for us. And Bristol has a number of services that aren't necessarily in other councils. So Bristol Community Meals would be a good example of that. And the transformation programme is aiming to develop those services in different ways. So the community meals one is an example, to develop that into a self-sustaining and then actually profit-generating business within its own right, still within the council, but to regard it in that way. And then we've set out in the report the way that other elements of the transformation programme are looking at in-house services. I just thought it might be helpful to just clarify a couple of things, reflecting on the comments from the statement earlier on from GMB, which is that if there's any changes, and this goes for any of the projects within the transformation programme, obviously they will go through the proper decision-making route. The colleague mentioned specifically seeing in the report a decision about transferring East Bristol Rehab Centre to Serona, just to emphasise that is not a decision, that's not on the cards, and I've said I'm happy to speak later and explain that and also do a written statement. And also in terms of South Bristol Rehab, and that's the centre that has under the previous transformation programme, it was agreed to transfer that to Serona, and we've made a comment in the report that there's lots of lessons learned there. That process is not absolutely finalised. There's some individuals who are still going through the process. So when that has finished in respect to them, we will do a all-encompassing lessons learned and absolutely include colleagues from unions and from Serona, as well as the staff themselves. So that's all I'll say.
Great, thank you. Councillor Weston, you're in first again, and then Councillor Townsend.
Would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'm just interested. Have you got any understanding of the, I don't know what you might call it, but the loss of staff as a result of what's happened in South Bristol? You're talking about huge lessons learned. We've got people from the unions coming in saying, please don't do that again. Please don't outsource. Look at what happened down south. Have you lost any staff as a result of the way in which that staff body were treated?
apologies, because I'm not close to the detail of that project, because it was under the previous transformation programme, although the savings were shown in this year, and I know it started before. I can provide any information on that afterwards, if that's helpful in response to the written statement.
I think Hugh's going to come in.
I think, yeah, just suffice to say that that we're still working through the options for all of the different members of staff that have been involved in the process, and so when that is complete, we'll be able to come up with a more complete outcome in regard to that.
Councillor Weston.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, page 4 of your report, page 131 in our ModGov packs. Looking at the workstream of continuous improvement and the savings you're projecting, and this actually cuts through on several of your other points as well. Number 9, pricing control. Is that actually, considering a rate of inflation, is that realistic saving? It's an open question on that one. I'm not sure we can deliver that.
So really good, absolutely good question. So there's a number of areas of savings that are much more challenging because of the economic context, absolutely, and that is one of them. So that's one that we've said is an absolute challenge to meet at the moment. Obviously, the cost of living crisis is hitting providers and our provider market, so we are working with them as much as we can. But within the context of the fact that Bristol, and one of the reasons I know that the council wanted a transformation programme, we are a high cost outlier nationally.
And building on that, if I may, on page 7, we talk about Bristol community meals. Again, it raises the issue of inflation. And there's a comment in the progress comments. Prices charged to customers have not increased. Are there plans to increase charges? And the reason I ask that now is not to try and catch you out on this, but I think a slow, gradual rise is better than suddenly having this massive leap that catches people completely by surprise. So I'm just asking that.
Absolutely. So that we took a decision because there hadn't been any, because of the how inappropriate it would be actually to do something sort of last minute, not to raise prices at all this year, but it is being looked at as part of the to develop a good business case for Bristol community meals, absolutely. But the prices from the meals that the service pays for from the supplier, as well as obviously fuel costs. I mean, it's about food. It's a bit service. It's about food and fuel. It's absolutely subject to cost of living pressures.
Can I ask something then? I mean, mine's a bit particular, and you might say you don't know anything about this, but it's within your report on page 8 or 135 of the pack. Reablement and intermediate care is discussed, and discharge to assess and home first programme. So I'm aware, a different authority last week, one of my relatives was in the back of an ambulance for several hours, many hours, at a A&E, with 36 ambulances at the same A&E parked up. Now, thankfully, not Bristol. I guess my question is, where are we with discharge to assess? I mean, the term used to be bed blocking, didn't it? What factor is that here in the city? What are we doing to try to minimise that? Because I'm presuming that was one of the causes of what was going on where my relative was.
Absolutely. I'll answer, and then Hugh may want to add something. So discharge to assess and home first are absolute key programmes between ourselves and health partners. And part of the reasons for mentioning the reablement and rehab services in the report is because Bristol is unusual in that it has invested in a large reablement service, which is great. And the reason that we've said about East Bristol Rehab Centre being seen as part of the solution is that we want to absolutely make sure that we are getting the best of that for that through flow from hospital. In terms of the data about where we're up to, I don't know that. I do know that the programme, they've seconded a joint, senior team to focus on D2A and home first between ourselves, the acute hospitals, and what was the CCG, now the Integrated Care Board. And it's one of the reasons we've put it into the transformation programme is to give it that status that it is very significant.
Thanks. That might be something we might want to look at as a commission, either at a Leeds meeting or at a future meeting. I see a hand, Councillor Hans.
I know it's a difficult times and all the rest of it, but care homes especially are facing real challenges in terms of their costs, especially energy costs. So have we factored in any increase in fees from care homes? Or if so, how? Another pressure, I know, but...
So inflation costs are added into the whole of the kind of care placement budget each year, so absolutely definitely. And we have a regular providers forum, which I know obviously energy prices, cost of care is something that is being factored in. We're finding a balance really between the fact that, as I said, we are a high cost outlier, but also very aware that the need to sustain the market, work with the market. It's part of the key focus of the commissioning team at the moment.
Councillor Stone.
Just a quick one on direct payments. Direct payments, are you considering increasing direct payments? Because I think that direct payments do not meet the needs of the users at the moment, and especially with the cost of living crisis also going on, etc., etc. And it looks like you're trying to make a saving of £500,000. So
we've actually structured it in direct payments in the programme in two different ways, and I did that very deliberately because the saving is related to when direct payments, sort of big contingencies that build up for an individual. It's actually about bringing those back into the system, into the DP pot overall, and shared back out again. But that isn't about how to increase direct payments and deal with the issues that you're referring to. So we deliberately kept them as two separate projects. And yeah, absolutely hearing loud and clear from across the city that pay rates for personal support assistance is one of the key issues. Obviously, we're definitely looking at that in the modelling, recognising that can add a cost, but also if we actually want to invest in direct payments and really shift the market and make it something that is a really positive option for the individuals, and also something that the frontline social workers feel really confident in referring to, because they know it's not a admin burden. It's something that it'll give the solutions that people want. That's definitely one of the issues that we're looking at. I mean, it's with all of this area, there's no easy solutions, but that's definitely in the mix.
I just got another one. Do you mind? Just a very quick one. I'd like to know more about the shared life services, because it's obviously very limited at the moment. So what is your programme in increasing that? Because again, you're looking at saving £50,000 on trying to influence people to have, to foster the elderly. I mean, what's your programme?
So the saving there was a ongoing budget saving each year, and we've taken that to deal with this year, and then we've put some further kind of investment funding in a bigger amount of money that we can invest into growing the service, working with the managers. Again, one of the issues that we're looking at is the rates that we pay, because I think in Bristol it's lower than average. Looking at just basically how there's a kind of sequential looking at the rates that we can offer, then just communication, engagement, to recruit additional providers for it, as well as then trying to push it as a bit like I said with DPs, as a route that social workers feel confident at referring in. So those are the kind of three chunks of work that we're looking at.
So technically, you need more funding, not less funding, to actually increase that offer.
It's one of the things that I've particularly learned in the 6 months that I've been with the council, that so many of the turning the tank around issues in adult social care, you invest to save in the long term, and we need to give the wider council the confidence financially that the investment is we're not just putting more money in and not dealing with the turning the tank around bit. Absolutely.
Thanks. I had a question. It might be more appropriate to you, Hugh, but maybe you can answer it, Julia. Appendix 2, where you've got the medium-term financial plan savings. I guess my question, and this is early on, so you might say this is far too early to know, were any of these going to be very, very difficult to actually deliver? I know in the past, delivering savings in adult social care has been a tough ask. Are any of these now looking, as we go into the year, to perhaps be not as deliverable as have been hoped?
I can start on that one, certainly. I think that, yes, we are challenged because it is a very challenging time. And there are some elements of it, especially those that are to do with the care market and the amount that we have to spend in order to sustain people in placements and to sustain larger packages of care, that are going to take longer to address, especially in the context of the galloping inflation and other cost of living orientated things, especially transport and food and things. So there are going to be challenges. That said, I'm quite confident with the periodical reporting that we do get through, usually reported through Cabinet, that we are slowing down the overspend in adults, and we are beginning to see moves in the right direction in order that our budget won't be quite as overspent as it has been. And I feel quite positive about how the adults budget is performing this year in comparison to in previous years. So it's a mixed bag, and very happy if anybody wants to have an in-depth conversation about it in detail. But as it is, yes, there are challenges to some of those, but I think we are kind of turning the tanker around.
I'll probably step you on resources scrutiny toes by asking about money. I've got to remember, I don't sit on the resources scrutiny panel anymore. We just worry about how we help you spend it rather than where it comes from. So yeah, it is. Anyway, were there any other final points or questions before we move on? No? Great. So final agenda. I think it's final agenda item. Let me pull it up a second. Thank you very much, by the way, for your report. It was very in-depth, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again in the future. So moving on then, we've got the Q4 Performance Progress Report and the Q1 Corporate Risk Management Report. As usual, we always put these at the end of the agenda. We know we'll never have time. We asked in advance if people had questions. I don't think any were submitted. I'm just checking.
Only in relation to EHCs, but they were on the agenda anyway.
So we probably covered those. I think though, maybe at a future People's Scrutiny Commission meeting, we should put those at the front, because otherwise you go through a whole year and you never actually give them the rigorous overview that they should have. So maybe we will try to do that at our next People's Scrutiny Commission. Otherwise, we'll be tempted to say, oh, we'll do it next time, and there'll always be something more important. And actually, I think both are quite important to go over. Finally, then, it would be 16, the work programme. So if we pull that up, so that is a slight amendment to our work programme, as in probably just the order. Has everybody seen that? The only other, I think, issue out of the work programme that was partially set beginning of the year is what we have not done is fully thought through what our task and finish should be this year, that in-depth piece of policy work that we wanted to do. Can I suggest that maybe we put that on the agenda for the next Leeds meeting, and we'll have a Leeds meeting sooner rather than later? And normally I think we invite all members to the Leeds meeting anyway, so if anyone wants to join who's a member of the Commission, they can, and we can talk through, maybe start thinking about what that is, because we will need to put that into the system, won't we, when we come up. So that takes a good couple of months to roll that into the system to make sure we've got the time for support. Does that seem a reasonable way forward? Was there anything else anyone wanted to add to the work programme? No? Okay, great. Well, I'm going to end the meeting 3 minutes early then, which I did not expect to say. That's the biggest shock of the day, I think. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I know we've had some really important topics to discuss. I think we all kept our calm. That's good. And if I don't see you all before, we'll see each other again in December, I believe. Bye then.